Good morning, everybody. How are ya? Might be a little surprised to see me today. You're all like, wow, I don't see Joe just out of the blue like that. I know. I'm here. Can't deny it. I'm here. Congressional hearings today, talking about the Jews and the schools. The Jews and the schools. and I was like, you know what? I didn't work last night. I mean, I worked on locals, but that's not my regular shift. Let me do a double shift today. So I'm covering this congressional hearing. We'll probably speed through parts that bore me. I don't know how much speeding time I'm going to have, but I'm probably going to speed through some parts that bore me. And I'm also and we'll see how it goes. We're going to see how this thing goes. That's basically what the plan is. I'm planning on having also a party tonight. A little celebration party tonight. Little celebration. A bunch of folks that you probably know. And you may like, you might hate. I don't know. I like them. Video backgrounds are now supported in the studio. What does that mean? Video backgrounds. I can have a video background in the studio? I can have a video around me? Get out of here. Oh my God. I don't have to have this still frame. I can have a video behind me? Oh my God. Oh, I'm going to have fun tonight. I'm having fun tonight. All right. Let's get to this thing. Where should I watch this? I don't even know where to watch. I haven't decided where I'm going to watch this. If I just look for CBS. Let's do CBS. Let's see what we. Oh, Ray, how could be here? There we go. Is this live? This looks live. This looks pretty live.
Officials kidnap dissidents and conduct cyber attacks here.
Like if street friends want me, they keep
or the
looking
People's
to commit.
Republic of China, which poses, in my view, a generational threat to our economic and national security.
Okay,
stripping the FBI of its 702 authorities would be a form of unilateral disarmament. Or take the elevated threat of international terrorism. 702 is key to our ability to detect a foreign terrorist organization overseas directing an operative here to carry out an attack in our own backyard. And U.S. person queries, in particular, may provide the critical link that allows us to identify the intended target or build out the network of attackers so we can stop them before they strike and kill Americans. Given the critical importance of 702, we are committed to being good stewards of our authorities. And to that end, I have ordered a whole host of changes to address unacceptable compliance incidents, reforms, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, that many members of this committee have seen with their own eyes in live demonstrations of our systems at FBI headquarters. We've improved our systems, enhanced training, added oversight and approval requirements, adopted new accountability measures. On top of that, we stood up a brand new Office of Internal Auditing that's been focused specifically on FISA compliance. Most of the declassified reports that have come out over the past year or so involve compliance errors that predate
locals is really having problems.
And I have been encouraged by the more recent data showing the significant positive impact that those reforms, those changes have had.
There's no closed captioning.
The most recently declassified opinion from the FISA court, for instance, shows a 98% compliance rate and observes that the reforms are, and I'm quoting the court here, having the desired effect. And the two most recent Department of Justice semi-annual reports likewise now show a greater than 98% compliance rate. We're proud of the progress we've made so far, but we are by no means done. We recognize that this is an ongoing effort and are determined to work with Congress to get it right. But as we enter this critical phase of the renewal process, it is imperative that we not undercut the effectiveness of this essential tool with a warrant requirement or some other restriction that would paralyze us and our ability to tackle fast-moving threats like the ones I just described. Because crucial to our ability to use this information to actually protect Americans is our ability to review it promptly and efficiently. And to be clear, no court has ever held that a warrant is required for the FBI to query 702 data already lawfully in our holdings. In fact, every court that has considered 702 in its current form, the FISA Court of Review, 3 different courts of appeals, has found 702 to be constitutional. So restricting the FBI's ability to collect under 702 or to review what's already in our collection, well, that would be a legislative policy choice. And if that's the path that's chosen, what are we going to say to the family whose loved one's care was sabotaged when a hospital was taken offline by a foreign adversary and the FBI wasn't able to stop that cyber attack? What's the justification for not using every lawful tool to stop China from stealing our technology and undermining our freedoms? Because I can assure you, the PRC is not holding back, and they're not tying their own hands behind their back. And what if there were a terrorist attack that we had a shot to prevent but couldn't take it because the FBI was deprived of its ability under 702 to actually look at the information already sitting in our holdings?
Son of a gun. I'm watching the wrong stupid thing. This is the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's not the Senate Judiciary Committee I'm looking for. Ah! Ah! This is not what I wanted. I knew something was freaking wrong. Go to C-SPAN. I'm like, this is so not what I don't care about Chris Wray. Then this is not what we're supposed to be watching today. No. Let me go to C-SPAN. You know, their audio and video always sucks. This is what I wanted.
UPenn is right behind them at 247th of 248. MIT is in the middle of the pack. What I'm describing is a grave danger inherent in assenting to the race-based ideology of the radical left. Senator Schumer hasn't put the pieces together, but the picture is far too clear now to American Jews. Institutional anti-Semitism and hate are among the poison fruits of your institution's cultures. The buck for what has happened must stop on the president's desk, along with the responsibility for making never again true on campus. Do you have the courage to truly confront and condemn the ideology driving anti-Semitism? Or will you offer weak, blame-shifting excuses and yet another responsibility?
Obviously, option B.
That's ultimately the most important question for you to confront in this hearing.
Obviously, option
I will close
B.
with this. I appreciate your appearances today on behalf of Harvard, UPenn, and MIT, respectively. It proves your universities have it.
Yeah, she's very old.
A sense
I happen
of
to like her, though.
accountability to the American people. But my praise for post-secondary education is very limited these days. Harvard, UPenn, and MIT, you have a very big role to play in shaping the future for all of academia. This moment is an inflection point. It demands leaders of moral clarity with the courage to delineate good from evil and
forget about moral clarity.
wrong.
There's no leadership. They're afraid of their own student body.
I look forward to each of your testimonies. I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you, Dr. Fox, and thank our witnesses for appearing today. Historically, college campuses have been hubs for students and faculty to foster intellectual thought and expression.
Then the 1900s
Incredibly,
came.
following Hamas's October 7th attack on innocent civilians in Israel and the ongoing conflict in Gaza,
It'd be interesting to see where the Democrats,
become polarized.
because a lot of them are
witnessing
pro-Israel. I'm curious to see
rise
how
in
they
incidents
fall.
of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. To be clear, this discrimination is nothing new on college campuses, indeed, nothing new in society generally. Any student of history knows that it did not start with the October 7th attacks or any one new event, and it didn't start with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. My colleagues would do well to recall this country has a centuries-long history of racism and white supremacy.
That's not white supremacy. It's not white supremacists who are marching in schools,
colleges
you
and
idiot.
universities are often on the front lines of defending this right, but schools are also responsible for fostering campus environments that promote understanding, respectful dialogue, and above all else, student safety. So today we'll hear from
very low percentage of them are white
on their efforts to protect students and address discrimination on campus. Of note, this is an opportunity that my
that's how
Republican colleagues
it's white
denied us
supremacy
in 2017.
Yes.
When committee Democrats called for a hearing 6 years ago on campus
You're right.
discrimination,
DEI has made it
when
work.
white supremacists marched through the University of Virginia grounds shouting, "Jews will not replace us." We couldn't get a
nothing
hearing
to
back
do with
then.
this.
Now
Nothing.
my colleagues
Stop
claim
it.
to be committed to
Stop
combating
Stop it.
discrimination on campus.
You suck.
They're also
You're whitewashing
contradictorily
right now.
and
Where you're pretending
simultaneously
that you're doing
stoking
like some sort of good, you're actually
culture
making
wars
things
that
worse.
can be divisive and
Idiots.
discriminatory. Moreover, House Republicans are proposing significant cuts to the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, the very office responsible for upholding students' civil rights and investigating discrimination claims.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways. You can't call for action, then hamstring the
I saw you last night. Super chat, Nick.
That action
Kyle,
to protect
I saw it.
civil rights.
I saw it, B.
In stark contrast,
You're
the
like,
Biden
hey,
administration has
well,
taken
you
an
suck
active
so
role
much,
in
Kyle.
helping institutions protect students as part of the White House's national strategy to combat anti-Semitism. Under President Biden's direction, the Department of Education has provided additional guidance to colleges and universities on how to uphold their obligation under Title VI
basically
of
he's
the
making
Civil
all
Rights
about
Act
his
of
agenda as opposed to
1964
what the actual
and
issue
better address
is. That's what pissed me
anti-Semitism,
off.
Islamophobia, and
He's
all forms
using
of discrimination
this-
on campus.
He's
Also
using
open
this as a way to
investigations
platform
into
his
recent
stupid worldview,
incidences on
as
many
opposed to actually
campuses,
addressing the issue,
including
which
Harvard,
means you
Columbia,
suck.
Cornell,
You loser.
Wesley, University of Pennsylvania, University of Tampa, just to name a few.
You mean Michael Scott
In
instead.
closing, I want to echo
Be more
my
confident with
colleague,
this.
and I'll quote Senator Schumer again. All Americans share a responsibility and an obligation to fight back whenever we see the rise of prejudice of any type in our midst. So today, I hope my Republican colleagues will denounce the culture wars that have distracted us from protecting.
You're starting the
many
culture
vulnerable
war, you
students, and I hope
jackass.
we can stand behind the Biden administration's critical work to ensure that every student and
idiot.
educator has access to a campus
Oh,
free
go
of
to hell.
discrimination,
You suck.
harassment, and violence.
You
To
suck.
that end, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr.
suck.
Scott. Pursuant to Rule 8C, all members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m., 14 days after the date of this hearing, which is December 19, 2023. And without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other extraneous material referenced during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record.
Yes,
I
I'm
now
unchained.
turn to the introduction of our
I'm
witnesses.
unchained.
Our first witness is Dr. Claudine Gay, who is the president of Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Our second witness is Ms. Liz McGill, who's the president of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Our next witness is Dr. Pamela Nadell, who is a professor of history and Jewish studies at American University in Washington, D.C. And our final witness is Dr.
Wow, she
Sally
looks angry.
Kornbluth.
That looks
who's
like a bitter
president of the
woman.
Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
That's
in
what we saw,
Cambridge,
Easy.
Massachusetts.
Wow.
Note, Dr. Kornbluth will monitor her diabetes during the hearing. We thank you all for being here today and look forward to your testimony.
I think all
I'd
these
like to
folks
remind the
are
witnesses
monitoring
that
their
we have
diabetes
read
through
the
this
written
hearing.
statements, which will appear in full in the hearing record. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8D and Committee Practice, I ask that each of you limit your oral presentations to a 5-minute summary of your written statement. I also like to remind the witnesses to be aware of the responsibility to provide accurate information to the committee. If we have a demonstration that gets unruly, we will ask the campus police to take people out immediately. I now recognize Dr. Gay for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member Scott, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Claudine Gay, and I'm the president of Harvard University. It's an honor to be here today.
In order to get the job, she had to
representing a
change her
community
last
of
name
more
to
than
Gay.
25,000 undergraduate and graduate students, more than 19,000 faculty and staff, and more than 400,000 alumni, including multiple members of this committee. Thank you for calling this hearing on the critical topic of anti-Semitism. Our community still mourns those brutally murdered during the Hamas terrorist attack in Israel on October 7th. Words fail in the face of such depravity, the deadliest single day for the Jewish community since the horrors of the Holocaust. In the 2 months since the atrocities of October 7th and the subsequent armed conflict and humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we have seen a dramatic and deeply concerning rise in anti-Semitism around the world, in the United States, and on our campuses, including my own. I know many in our Harvard Jewish community are hurting and experiencing grief, fear, and trauma. I have heard from faculty, students, staff, and alumni of incidents of intimidation and harassment. I have seen reckless and thoughtless rhetoric shared in person and online, on campus and off. I have listened to leaders in our Jewish community who are scared and disillusioned. At the same time, I know members of Harvard's Muslim and Arab communities are also hurting. During these past months, the world, our nation, and our campuses have also seen a rise of incidents of Islamophobia. During these difficult days, I have felt the bonds of our community strain. In response, I have sought to confront hate while preserving free expression. This is difficult work, and I know that I have not always gotten it right. The free exchange of ideas is the foundation upon which Harvard is built, and safety and well-being are the prerequisites for engagement in our community. Without both of these things, our teaching and research mission founder. In the past 2 months, our bedrock commitments have guided our efforts. We have increased security measures, expanded reporting channels, and augmented counseling, mental health, and support services. We have reiterated
Mental
that
health is
speech
not
that
any
incites
help
violence,
anymore.
threatens safety, or violates Harvard's policies against bullying and harassment is unacceptable. We have made it clear that any behaviors that disrupt our teaching and research efforts will not be tolerated. And where these lines have been crossed, we have taken action. We have drawn on our academic expertise to create learning opportunities for our campus community. We have begun examinations of the ways in which anti-Semitism and other forms of hate manifest at Harvard and in American society. We have also repeatedly made clear that we at Harvard reject anti-Semitism and denounce any trace of it on our campus or within our community.
Do you recognize that anti-Zionism is actually anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism is a symptom of ignorance.
Do you recognize
and the
that?
cure for ignorance is knowledge. Harvard must model what it means to preserve free expression.
Because that's really what the
while
issue is.
combating
That's
prejudice
ultimately what the
and
issue comes down
preserving
to.
the security of our
That
community.
this anti-Zionism is
We are undertaking that
invariably
hard,
rooted in
long-term
Jew
work
hatred.
with the attention
There's no such
and
thing as
intensity it requires.
anti-Australianism.
Once again, I thank the committee for the opportunity to discuss this important work.
The only
I
country
have
in the
faith
world
today
that's like, this
that
is what
through
we're anti.
thoughtful, focused, and determined effort, we will once again meet adversity and grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gay. Ms. McGill, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Seriously. Seriously. The crook.
Thank you,
I
Chairwoman
agree with
Fox,
you, David.
Ranking Member Scott, and
I
distinguished
like
members
Fox.
of this committee, the opportunity to be here today. My name is Elizabeth McGill, and I am the president of the University of Pennsylvania. Let me begin by saying that I and the University of Pennsylvania are horrified by and condemn Hamas's abhorrent and brutal terror attack on Israel on October 7th. There is no justification, none, for those heinous attacks.
This is the Crypt Keeper, by the way. Those of you who are too young to remember Tales from the
occurring
Crypt.
in Israel and Gaza during the ensuing war are heartbreaking. This pain, sorrow, and fear extends to our campus and to our city of Philadelphia. This hearing this morning takes place just 2 days after the Philadelphia community witnessed in horror the hateful words and actions of protesters who marched through the city and then near our campus. These protesters directly targeted a Center City business that is Jewish and Israeli-owned, a troubling and shameful act of anti-Semitism. Philadelphia police and
Well, at least
Penn
they
Public
recognize
Safety
that.
were present, and thankfully no one was injured. But these events have understandably left many in our community upset.
It's
and
designed
afraid.
to intimidate Jews. That's what it's for.
Anti-Semitism,
They're really
an
proud of
old,
the fact that they feel like they're
viral,
intimidating
and
Jews.
pernicious evil has been steadily rising in our society, and these world events have dramatically accelerated that surge. Few places have proven immune, including Philadelphia and campuses like ours. This is unacceptable. We are combating this hate on our campus with both immediate and comprehensive action. I have condemned anti-Semitism publicly, regularly, and in the strongest possible terms. And today, let me reiterate
I don't see
my
why.
and Penn's unyielding commitment to combating it.
In what way?
We immediately investigate any hateful act, cooperating with both law enforcement and the FBI, where we have identified individuals who have committed these acts in violation of either policy or law. We initiate disciplinary proceedings and engage law enforcement. We have acted decisively to ensure safety throughout and near our campus, expanding the presence of public safety officers at our religious life centers and all across campus. On November 1st, just over a month ago, I announced Penn's action plan to combat anti-Semitism. This builds on our anti-hate efforts to date, and it is anchored firmly in the United States national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. The plan centers on 3 key areas and has many elements. Those areas are safety and security, engagement, and education. As part of this plan, I have convened and charged a task force to identify concrete, actionable recommendations, directing them to provide me with the recommendations both in real time and then a final report in a couple of months. To ensure that our Jewish students have a direct channel to share their experiences with me, I've created a student advisory group on the student experience. Today's hearing is focused on anti-Semitism and its direct impact on the Jewish community. But history teaches us that where anti-Semitism goes unchecked, other forms of hate spread and ultimately can threaten democracy.
Oh, there we go.
We are seeing a rise in our society in harassment, intimidation, and threats toward individuals based on their identity as Muslim, Palestinian, or Arab.
Here we go.
At Penn, we are investigating all these allegations for members of our community and providing resources to support individuals experiencing threats, online harassment, and doxing. We will continue to deploy all the necessary resources to support any member of the community experiencing hate. As president, I am committed to a safe, secure, and supportive educational environment so that our academic mission can thrive. It is crucial that ideas are exchanged and diverse viewpoints are debated. As a student of constitutional democracy, I know that we need both safety
Notice how all
and
these
free
heads of
expression
schools are all
for
women.
universities and ultimately democracy.
You can't get a job there if you're a man.
In these times, these
not
competing
running a
principles
school.
can be difficult to balance, but I am determined to get it right. And we must get this right. The stakes are too high. Penn would not be what it is without its strong Jewish community, past, present, and future. I am proud of this tradition and deeply troubled when members of our Jewish community share that their sense of belonging has been shaken. Under my leadership, we will never, ever
evaporated
from our moral responsibility to combat anti-Semitism and educate all to recognize and reject hate. We will remain vigilant. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. McGill. Dr. Nadel, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member Scott for inviting me today. I'm Pamela Nadel. I'm a professor of Jewish history at American University, and I'm currently writing the book, Anti-Semitism, an American Tradition, supported by a National Endowment for the Humanities Public Scholar Award. And I'm delighted to be here today because this gives me an opportunity to thank Congress for sustaining through the NEH scholarship essential to understanding our nation's past.
Way to make
This is the third time I have testified about this topic before Congress. The first was in 2017, just 3 months after white supremacists chanting "Jews will not replace us" paraded through the University
was way
of
more
Virginia,
chilling than that.
brandishing
This was way more
torchlights,
chilling.
echoing Nazi stormtroopers strutting
And that
through
was
Germany
chilling.
in the
This
1930s.
was way more chilling.
I emphasize this because
The
the
size,
anti-Semitism
scope,
igniting on
and-
campuses today is not new.
See,
It
that's
is
what
part of a long history
stupid leftists.
of American anti-Semitism.
Shut up.
While anti-Semitism is difficult to
Way to
define,
weaken your
historical
own
examples
voice.
convey
It's like, how
some
do
of
you
its
take-
contours. Anti-Semites believe that Jews have been
This is a
corrupted
stupid
by
Jonathan
money
Greenblatt
since
approach.
Judas betrayed
suck.
Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, and they've employed code names for avaricious Jews.
Oh, you
Shylock,
stink.
Rothschild, and in the 21st century, George Soros.
Lie. You're an
Anti-Semites
idiot.
believe Jews
Shut up.
conspire to destroy
You're
Christian
an idiot.
Western
You're
civilization.
an idiot. George
These
Soros is supporting
conspiracy theories
Palestinians. You
gained
stupid
currency in the
bitch.
1920s when Henry Ford's newspaper ran the series, The International Jew, the world's foremost problem.
Oh, you
Today, the charge that the Jews are internationalists has been replaced by the dog whistle globalist, implying that
Oh, you're
Jews are
such
the
a
puppet
jerk.
masters of the
Oh,
worldwide
start using
order.
it for your other stupid
Across
agendas.
American history,
You freaking
people from
gino.
all walks of life have conveyed anti-Semitic ideas since 1654, when New Amsterdam Governor Peter Stuyvesant
You
tried
make
to
anti-Semitism
expel, and I
worse. You're
quote,
just like
"this
Jonathan Greenblatt.
deceitful
You're an
race,
idiot.
such hateful enemies
You're a
and
moron. You
blasphemers of the name of
airheaded,
Christ."
blabbering idiot.
Now, more than 350 years later, we have just marked the 5th anniversary of the murders at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue.
And that happens because
On
of people
city
like you.
streets, abuse is hurled at
Idiot.
Orthodox Jews, and swastikas are graffitied on dorm doors and also at the State Department. The long history of American anti-Semitism left its mark in higher education. Quotas on the admission of Jewish students began in the Ivy League in the 1920s and spread to more than 700 private colleges and universities. The campuses also wrestled with the challenge of anti-Semitic speech
So angry about
before
this.
this fall.
I'm getting so
In the early 1990s, Holocaust deniers took out full-page ads
appreciate the
in
donation.
college
to Chamomile tea.
newspapers. Those ads launched furious debates about free speech on campus and also helped propel Holocaust courses into the university to respond to the
You suck.
disinformation. Anti-Israel invective has been flaring on campus well before this fall. I could look back more than 20 years. In October 2000, 200 students at the University of Michigan yelled, "Israel is a fascist state," and protested a Hillel teach-in. But the barbarity of the Hamas terror of October 7th adds a terrible new chapter to Jewish history.
This woman should have
Anyone
no
who
platform at
claims
all.
to care about human rights should denounce these horrors. That so many on campus not only did not, but that they justified the savagery in name of opposition to Israel has caused Jews around the world
It's
deep
because of
anguish.
stupid people like you who
While
try
I
pretending
deplore
what is
all
not
hateful
anti-Semitic is
anti-Semitic
anti-Semitic.
speech
It's
remains
idiots
in
like
America
you. You make
protected.
this problem
Free
worse.
speech stands
Much
at
worse.
the core of the liberal arts education, an education which almost every member of Congress benefited from when they were students. But free speech does not permit harassment, discrimination, bias, threats, or violence in any form. And when they occur, our institutions, and not just the campus, but our nation, they have in place mechanisms to respond. The American Jewish community has long strategized about how to reduce anti-Semitism.
One way is
Their
to get you a
efforts
muzzle.
received a stunning confirmation when the U.S. National
Get people like
Strategy
you a
to
muzzle
Counter
and
Anti-Semitism
no platform.
was published.
Mute
I
your
believe
mic.
this is
That's
the
one way to
first time
combat
any nation
anti-Semitism.
has developed such a document. I urge Congress to do everything in
Where's
its
the
power
music to play her
support
off?
the national
That's
strategy.
what Congress
and
needs. They need the
also
music.
the forthcoming national strategy to counter Islamophobia.
You
Thank you.
suck.
Thank you. Dr. Kornbluth, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairwoman Fox,
See,
Ranking
4
Member
women up
Scott,
there, of
and
course.
distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to describe
What a
how
disaster.
MIT is fighting the scourge of anti-Semitism. My name is Sally Kornbluth.
That's what I need.
have
I
been
need one of those
president of
gongs. I'm going to
MIT
use this as a gong.
since
Shut up.
As an American,
Let's see. Maybe she's
Jew,
better.
and as a human being, I abhor anti-Semitism. And my administration is combating it actively.
Yeah.
Since October 7th,
Let's see what you're
my
doing.
campus communications have been crystal clear about the dangers of anti-Semitism and about the atrocity of the Hamas terror attack. Let me repeat what I said in my very first message to campus. In that video, I said, quote, "The brutality perpetrated on innocent civilians in Israel by terrorists from Hamas is horrifying. In my opinion, such a deliberate attack on civilians can never be justified," unquote. I also made clear that students were feeling unsafe because of their Jewish faith or their ties to Israel, and said, quote, "That should trouble every one of us deeply," unquote. I have reinforced this message, including in a November 14th campus video. As I said then, quote, "Anti-Semitism is real, and it is rising in the world. We cannot let it poison our community," unquote. I have been direct and unequivocal, and such leadership statements are important, but they must be paired with action. And this is just what we are doing at MIT. Months before October 7th, MIT joined the International Hillel Campus Climate Initiative, which helps universities build awareness of and actions against anti-Semitism. We have launched an MIT-wide effort called Standing Together Against Hate. It will emphasize both education and community building, especially in our residence halls. In addition to fighting anti-Semitism, it will address Islamophobia, also on the rise and also underreported. MIT will take on both, not lumped together, but with equal energy and in parallel. Importantly, as is clearly visible on campus, we have increased the police presence. Safety has been our primary concern. Nonetheless, I know some Israeli and Jewish students feel unsafe on campus as they bear the horror of the Hamas attacks and the history of anti-Semitism. These students have been pained by chants and recent demonstrations. I strongly believe that there is a difference between what we can say to each other, that is what we have a right to say, and what we should say as members of one community. Yet as president of MIT, in addition to my duties to keep the campus safe and to maintain the functioning of this national asset, I must at the same time ensure that we protect speech and viewpoint diversity for everyone. This is in keeping with the Institute's principles on free expression. Meeting those three goals is challenging, and the results can be terribly uncomfortable, but it is essential to how we operate in the United States. Those who want us to shut down protest language are in effect arguing for a speech code. But in practice, speech codes do
The most
not work.
effective speaker out of these 4 women so
Problematic
far was the
speech
woman
needs
from
to be
Harvard, that gay
countered
woman,
with other speech
the black one,
and with
the
education.
gay black woman.
And we are doing that.
Her last name's
However,
Gay.
the right to
I
free
don't-
speech does not extend to harassment,
Gay black woman.
discrimination,
Actually
or
sounded the
incitement to
most
violence in our community.
Intelligent out of these
MIT
4.
policies are clear on this. To keep the campus functioning, We also have policies to regulate the time, manner, and place of demonstrations. Reports of student conduct that may violate our policies are handled through our faculty-led Committee on Discipline. Our campus actions to date have protected student safety, minimized disruptions to campus activities, and protected the right to free expression. We are intensifying our central efforts to combat anti-Semitism, the vital subject of this hearing. I note that I am also deeply concerned about the rise in prejudice against Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians,
Obviously.
nationally and in our community.
Really?
And we
Where's
are
that?
determined to combat that as well. We are also supporting faculty, staff, and student initiatives to counter hate. And thanks to an inspiring group of faculty members, we are seeing more discussion among students with conflicting views. We know there is further work to do, but we are seeing progress, and MIT's vital mission continues. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kornbluth.
Because you fell asleep a long time ago.
I'll begin the questioning of our witnesses. I'm going to ask members. Before I ask my questions, let me do some housekeeping. Under Committee Rule 9, we'll now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule.
So he
I
was giving her
remind
the,
members
what she
that
needs
I'll
to read.
strictly enforce the 5-minute rule. So members are advised to keep your questions succinct so the witnesses have time to answer.
What if they're grandstanding and
Please
don't care
don't.
about what the answer is?
Talk for 4 minutes and then ask the witness a question.
That's what they all do.
That we've heard from many students that they do not feel safe. You've talked about that in your statements. But the anti-Semitism we've seen on your campuses didn't come out of nowhere. There are cultures at your institutions that foster it.
Yep.
Because you have faculty and students who hate Jews, hate Israel, and are comfortable apologizing for terror.
Mm-hmm.
How did your campuses get this way? What is it about the way that you hire faculty and
I know the
approve
answer to that
curriculum
question.
that's allowing
We'll see
your
if they give it.
campuses to be
I don't think they
infected
will.
by this intellectual and moral
I'm going to hear what their
rot?
thoughts are.
President Gay, I'm going to ask you to give me a brief answer. I also would invite you to follow up with more in writing, and we will follow up with you. So I will go down the line, President Gay, then President McGill, and President Kornbluth.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Fox. Again, anti-Semitism has no place at Harvard.
Answer the question.
When we recruit faculty, we do so with the understanding that they are joining a community where we honor, celebrate, and nurture open discourse, both on the campus and in the classroom. And to be a successful teacher and educator at Harvard requires the ability to draw out all of the viewpoints and voices in your classroom, irrespective of one's political views. And we devote significant resources to training our faculty in that pedagogical skill and to
Thank you.
prioritizing that in our recruiting and hiring.
What does that
Thank
have to do with
Ms.
why there's
McGill.
so much virulent Jew hatred at Harvard?
Thank you for the opportunity to address the question.
Completely dodge that answer.
I'm troubled by what you're reporting about the culture of the institutions that we're leading. Very contrary to the values that I hold as a leader of University of Pennsylvania, as well as the institution, where any form of hate is very contrary to our values. I would venture and answer Chairwoman Fox that anti-Semitism has a role in the broader society, and that's what we're seeing happening in the society and on our
not at all
campuses,
fostered
and
by
I'm
the
committed
schools.
to combating it in immediate term and the long term.
That's crap. She's basically
Thank you.
it's a societal problem, not
Dr.
our problem.
Kornbluth.
Yes,
Crap.
so MIT
I mean, it's
is a
true, but
majority
it's really
STEM
not why it's
education and
reflected
research
so deeply in schools.
institution, and we are devoted
That's
to
how diverse
solving the
they are
problems that
there.
face
True.
society. Our faculty are hired for their brilliance, Now, we allow them to say what they'd like in the classroom in the name of free expression, but we are committed to having them know that that our campus must be a welcoming and inclusive environment. And although they may say what they like in the classroom academically, targeting any individual student, harassing or discriminating is strictly forbidden in our classrooms. And
How about the fact that your curriculum
Thank
teaches
you.
that Israel is a terrible
We
place?
will be following up with asking for
filled with
specific
apartheid.
plans for
That's part of the
disciplining
problem.
student and faculty who assault or harass
You
students
get paid
or
millions of
prevent
dollars
them
to
from
send that message.
accessing
said
undisrupted
that.
classes or campus spaces. We'll be asking for your plan for preventing this rot from perpetuating, how you're going to hire and assess instructors, how will you change how you govern students, and what are the practical steps you will plan to take. I want to ask you one more question. As I've said, and Ms. McGill, I appreciate the fact that you feel concerned about my feeling about the fundamental culture on the campuses that's foundational to this issue, denial of the right of Israel to exist. So I want to ask each
That's what
one
these
of you,
schools teach.
President Gay, do you believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish nation?
Jewish nation.
I agree that the state of Israel has the right to exist.
Ms. McGill, same question.
I agree, Chairwoman Fox, the state of Israel has the right to exist.
Well, why don't your
Dr.
schools teach
Kornbluth.
that?
absolutely, Israel has the right to exist.
Why is that not part of your
I
curriculum?
want to thank our witnesses again for being here and to say we will follow up and to tell you that while
the
we've
question,
talked about a
Fox.
larger
That's the
culture
question.
out
Why don't your
there,
curricula
it's
teach
the
that?
universities who should be examples of what this nation is all about. I yield back and I recognize the distinguished ranking member who is
I want to point out you're correct. It was a
wanting
kiss the
me
ring
to
moment. But
recognize Mr.
it's not a
Corcoran.
kiss the ring moment if you follow up with the question of,
Thank
well,
you,
leave that. Why don't you
Chairwoman Fox. And I want to thank you for the moment of silence for the 137 hostages who are still being held to this day. We had a hearing a couple of weeks ago on anti-Semitism where I shared with my colleagues and the witnesses that a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen with family in Waterford, Connecticut, was one of those being held at the time, and we thought her husband, her name was Liat Benin and Avi Benin. The good news is a week ago, Liat was released. And unfortunately, a day later, the Israeli military shared with the family that human remains, which were found at the kibbutz where the violent attack took place, unfortunately matched up to Aviv. Again, Hamas never shared the information about whether or not they had him or not, which is just another example of their treachery. Dr. Nadel, in your testimony on page 8, you talked about President Biden's U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, and in particular, you talked about the use of Title VI of the U.S. Civil Rights Act in terms of being an effective tool on campuses to combat anti-Semitism. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
So Title VI allows for responding to some of the issues that the presidents of these universities, but also, frankly, of most universities around the nation, it seems at the moment, have been dealing with in terms of when anti-Semitism moves beyond free speech, moves beyond rhetoric, and
well, you're claiming that saying
Soros
is
the issue is
you're
that
the one who's
the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of
perpetuating
Education
that problem.
needs to be fully funded in order to implement the U.S. strategy
If we
to
gave you
counter
$1
anti-Semitism.
trillion,
And
you wouldn't
I just
know how to
want
deal
to
with this
comment
problem
about this
your
strategy because
incompetence.
it is an extraordinary document. It has actions for the White House to carry out, or that division, but it has issues for Congress to carry out, which I have a sense Congress has not been carrying out, and it also has major charges to whole of society to respond to anti-Semitism, some of which we are hearing is already happening on the campuses. The problem is they don't make headlines because they're not a bunch of protesters.
No, the problem is that you
Thank
suck
you.
at your
And
job.
again, it's important to note that document was released back in May of 2023, certainly before this committee and the outrageous events of October 7th. And the ranking member mentioned in his opening remarks that, at the same time we're holding this hearing, we're also now still trying to get a budget passed for fiscal year 2024. The majority in the House reported out their budget, which, as he mentioned, carried a cut.
Which is
for
why
the
this woman
Office of
isn't
Civil
one
Rights.
reason
To be
that
more
woman's an
specific,
idiot.
it's a
You're correct,
25% cut, $35 million out of their rather small budget, $72 million lower than what the president had asked for. I mean, we had a witness here again 2 weeks ago from who worked for almost 20 plus years at ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. They've been around for 110 years.
Talib has such a big head.
anti-Semitism
Look
in
how
this
much bigger
country.
her head
And,
is than this
again,
dude's.
she talked about the fact that, that type of cut is just going to cripple the ability of the anti-Semitism police, if you want to sort of look at it that way, in terms of trying to stop this type of activity on campuses. And again, I was just wondering if you had sort of what your view is of a cut in terms of the impact of the Office of Civil Rights to do its job.
I think the cut is absolutely devastating. And what I would also remind everyone is that the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Education does not only focus on anti-Semitism, it focuses on all forms of hate. And I would guess, I actually tried to find this information.
The issue they're having in these schools is because the schools perpetuate messaging that basically says Israel's an apartheid state. Israel is racist. Israel's committing genocide. That's the messaging these schools are giving. And none of these idiots want to actually admit that.
Terrible bias. So it is
And this moron here.
unconscionable to make that cut.
And talk is cheap. I mean, I've been around here a while. Budgets are what really, I think, show the true willingness to act in situations like this.
Has no clue.
And I'd just like to close by mentioning that in Connecticut, a young transfer student, international student from the West Bank, Tassin Ali Hamad, a sophomore at Trinity College, she's a math major who was up visiting friends in Burlington, Vermont. They were walking from going bowling, and this coward came out of his house with a firearm and at point blank range shot all three students who were they were going to a relative's house at the time. And it shows again that the civil rights effort of the Department of Justice, which also was being subjected to a potential cut, needs to get full funding in the Office of Civil Rights. And with that, I would yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. I now recognize Congressman Wilson from South Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Virginia Foxx. And Chairwoman Virginia Foxx, I believe, appropriately began this hearing about how serious this is, that the Iran puppets of Hamas have victimized the world, including here in the United States. And it's shocking as we include people who have been affected. It should be Paul Kessler of California, who was murdered by a professor supporting Hamas as he was demonstrating peacefully on behalf of the people of Israel.
Yeah.
And so we have victims right in our country of murder in California.
Yeah.
With that in mind, and I say this respectfully to each of the university professors here today, without any explanation, I would like the answer, and it should be a percentage of conservatives. And that is, you each rightfully promote diversity and inclusion of race and gender with percentages available. That is available at your universities. What is the percentage of conservative professors at your institutions? I only want to know the percent of conservatives. What is the number, Dr. President Gay?
Thank you, Congressman. So I can't provide you that statistic because it's not data that we collect, but I will say that we try to draw our talent to Harvard from.
And hey, we've got to race ahead, please. I want more. I just want to know, what is the percentage of conservative professors at Harvard?
I do not have that statistic. We don't collect that data.
Me. And President McGill, what are the percentage of conservative professors allowed to teach at your institution?
Representative, I strongly believe in a wide variety of perspectives. We do not track that information, so I can't give that to you.
Okay, no, none. I got the message. And President Kornbluth, what is the percentage of conservative professors at MIT?
We do not document people's political views, but
course not.
conservatives are
Of course
welcome to
not. We
teach
just don't
our
let them
own.
come unless they
and
bend
I
the
think
knee
this
to
is
us.
so sadly and shamefully revealing that there's no
Yep.
diversity and inclusion
Yep.
of intellectual thought. And the result of that is anti-Semitism. And you can study with government money all you want to, doctor, but it's due to illiberalism that has taken over the country. And you might look into that
sir.
when you get your next government grant. With that in mind, the barbaric mass murder on October 7th by Iran puppets Hamas invading Israel, trained by war
They
criminal
don't want
Putin,
anti-Semitism
has
laws.
shockingly revealed that
They don't
many
want
college
that.
campuses
They're
are
teaching
sickeningly anti-Semitic.
anti-Semitism.
This is defending the maniacal Hamas agenda. The Hamas agenda is in their covenant of August 1988. I hope you read it because it says in Article 7, I'll take you, you don't have to read the whole thing, kill the Jews. What that means is death to Israel, death to America. And to have that presented is disgusting. Sadly, college campuses have descended from coveted citadels intellectual freedom to illiberal sewers of intolerance and bigotry. Diversity and inclusion are a George Orwell 1984 implementation, as we see, excluding conservative thought. The solution for closed-minded intolerance on campuses is obvious. To liberate academia from denial of free speech, respecting the First Amendment, there should be diversity and inclusion of more conservative academics overcoming today's blatant discrimination. With that in mind, Dr. McGill,
And it's not like it's not like anyone ever tried wiping out Arabs.
Students at the University of Pennsylvania who were
Not
in a
because
state
they
of
were
shock
Arabs.
about the state of the university.
The real push
And
for
you
an
say the
ethno-state
university
came
has
because of the
introduced a plan
Holocaust.
to combat
That's why I
anti-Semitism.
got granted
Yet we
ultimately.
hear of more incitement and intimidation of Jewish students at Penn.
Oh, I'm
Do you
totally on board
understand
with
that
this.
having policies
Totally
means
on board
nothing
with
if
this.
you don't implement them? And how
Shut
many
all these
students or
schools down.
faculty have been
Your own
removed or
indoctrination
disciplined under your
centers.
policies? What is the average time for action on student conduct or other policies? Conclude, you can get this back to me later. What are you enforcing? At a pro-Hamas Penn protest, President Huda Fakhrudin and faculty member Ahmad al-Mala were seen enthusiastically clapping in support
Yay,
of the
support
speaker as he
terrorism,
shouted,
Mr. Hat.
"Go
You're
back to
such a-
Moscow,
You're so
Brooklyn,
noble. You're so
blanking
honorable.
Berlin."
You
Where
support
you
the,
came from,
the
end
mass
quote.
murder of
Has any
civilians.
action
You're
been
so
taken to address
honorable. Oh, you're
Professor
such a good
Fakhrudin
person.
and
Oh,
Professor
yeah.
Ahmad Mala's
You must be, your
support of
parents must be
this
so
insightful
proud.
and
Oh, what a-
intimidating speech?
What a
How are
good person you
Jewish
are.
students in Fakhrudin's classes supposed to receive fair treatment when she endorses hatred?
My son and daughter is still in Israel, yeah.
And I'll introduce that. And also,
Fortunately,
I'm
there's very
conclude
little
by another
vibe in
question. How in the
Jerusalem,
world
where
can
he
y'all
is.
now have a class on resistance literature from pre-Islamic Arabia featuring a person who is with the terrorist organization PFLF? We'll present this to you. Thank you.
We go from Mr. Wilson from South Carolina to Ms. Wilson from Florida.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Fox and Ranking Member Scott.
What the hell's happening now?
And thank you to the witnesses
What
for
the
your
hell's with the
testimonies
hat?
today.
What's with the hat?
As the witnesses have shared, anti-Semitism anywhere is abhorrent and unacceptable and must be condemned.
Oh, God.
I'm privileged to represent a
Give lip
strong,
service.
united Jewish community in South Florida. My next door neighbor is a rabbi. My Jewish constituents have experienced everything from bomb threats
Oh,
on
my
Jewish centers, schools, to harassment of Jewish community members. I stand with them.
To quote Mustafa,
We talk often,
Arab Turk.
we
What is
commiserate,
Islam
and
an
we
Arab
pray.
Ponzi scheme? When even the
We
founder of
must
Turkey
take a
said-
stand
even
against
Islam.
all forms of hate,
Yeah, I don't think
whether
they're going to
that
wake up
be
anytime soon.
anti-Semitism,
They're too busy saying Soros.
Islamophobia,
Saying Soros.
racism, xenophobia, and terrorism. This
See,
must stop.
This is basically
In Congress for 7 years, I led the fight against Boko Haram, a terrorist group that kidnapped over 300 schoolgirls in Nigeria, gang rapes, beheadings, killing whole families. So I am particularly sensitive to this issue of terrorists and what they do. But disagreements about the conflict in the Middle East should never escalate to threats of violence against any community. We are a civilized society. We must draw a line and condemn hate. Please know that in May, the Biden-Harris administration introduced the U.S. National Strategy to Counter Anti-Semitism.
Oh, I'm sure they did a great job.
Comprehensive approach
A
addressing
whiz-bang job.
anti-Semitism in diverse environments,
Yeah, that worked really well so
including
far.
college campuses.
Yeah, they
With that, I have
did a
a
whiz-bang
few
job.
questions. Ms. Nadell, based on your knowledge from 2016
Her
to
complete lack of
2020, what has been the United States response to anti-Semitic events? I'm specifically thinking about Charlottesville, Unite
Yeah, of course
the Right,
you are. You
and
idiot.
what the
You
Trump
idiot.
Pence
Because
administration
we need to
did
use an actual
compared
problem
to this administration.
to twist it into our narrative. You
Mr.
suck,
Dell.
woman.
The
Someone should
The
knock her
Unite
hat
the
off.
Right rally
No.
at the University of Virginia
Now we're gonna
and
hear her
in Charlottesville,
stupid thoughts.
Virginia in August of 2017 was for
a
me,
blip.
and I believe actually
blip.
for the majority of American Jews, a
Wrong.
major turning point.
Wrong.
It signaled
Wrong.
that the long history
Wrong.
of anti-Semitism in the United
Idiot.
States, that it was about
Stupid.
to burst out again.
No. And it
And
clearly didn't.
For the first
because for the
time
next 4 years,
ever
nothing
that
happened.
I
you
know
moron.
of, Jews who were worshiping in their synagogues, in a synagogue on Saturday morning, and they watched some of those Unite the Right ralliers parade past the
No,
synagogue
because if you're watching, if
armed,
you're in a synagogue, you're not
and
watching on a
they
Saturday
had to
morning. You
sneak out of
stupid,
the back of
self-hating
the
Jew.
synagogue because they were afraid that violence would break out.
Idiot.
So what we are seeing in terms of anti-Semitism in
Maybe
this
Jews
moment
in
in time is that
temples.
it's been rising
You suck.
and rising since 2016. And although President Trump called the people who were the protesters and counter-protesters, said there were very good people on both sides,
Liar.
I disagree. I
Li-
do not think there
You're
were
an
very good
idiot.
people on both
You're an
sides in
idiot.
Charlottesville
You're a
in
liar
August
and an idiot,
2017.
and you only hurt
Okay, as I
anyone who actually
reflected,
cares about fighting Jew
Professor
hatred.
Nadell,
You
on the
suck.
horrific events in the Middle East and the
You suck.
subsequent fallout on college campuses, I have been in contact with my friend and former congressional colleague, Ted Deutsch, who now heads the American Jewish
Representative
Committee. The committee is the
Fox,
author
you should have had
of the
me on to
AJC
counter these
Action
idiots.
Plan, a toolkit.
I actually know, I
for
actually understand what
university
causes
administrators.
anti-Semitism
One
and
of the
why it's in our
recommendations
schools.
is that
Should
the
have had me on
university
because these women
administrators
suck. And that woman
the
Nadler or whatever her
conversation
stupid
about the
name
Middle
is,
East back to a place of
is a massive part of the
fact-based
problem.
exchange. Could you comment on why this suggestion is important? And I'd like to, Madam Chair, enter this report into the record.
Without objection.
This action is important because the campuses where faculty who come from Middle East
You're
studies
incompetent.
and faculty who come from Jewish studies have long been in conversation, not just since October 7th. Those are the places where what we do in the university has been manifested in the best way. So I'm thinking, for example, of Dartmouth University, where they held a forum and they had, in their second forum, 300 people in the room, and they had 5,000 people online. Our universities not only educate our students today, but we can educate the wider public. And so I very much agree. I
You
admire
don't bother
Ted
educating your
Deutsch,
students.
and I admire the
moron.
American Jewish Committee for what they are trying to do. But this is not a magic bullet. It's not going to be fixed overnight.
Shut up.
But we are in the process of working on it
You're a
and
disaster.
hopefully tamping down anti-Semitism in America once again.
You will
Your
never
time is
take.
up.
You
Thank
make
you.
it
You're
worse.
back.
You
Mr.
make it
Thompson, you're
worse.
recognized for 5 minutes.
Stupid frowny face.
Thank you,
woman.
Madam Chair, for calling this important hearing. Thanks today
golly.
to all of our folks that are
It's like the Joker
testifying.
inverted.
As we've all seen in
Joker
recent
went
weeks,
trans
there's been
and
a
went- and
sharp
got
rise
inverted.
in anti-Semitic words, actions, and attacks online around the world, and unfortunately, right here at home.
Democrats suck.
Nowhere in the United States have these hateful and divisive ideas been more prevalent or found a safer home than on college campuses. It is up to all of us to call out these actions and protect Jewish faculty, students, staff at these institutions. Unfortunately, many of our university leaders have not met this moment and have allowed anti-Semitism to continue to
true.
grow and to rear its ugly head.
Idiots
President McGill,
like
does the University of Pennsylvania have in place any policies to ensure that each student who's enrolled at the university receives information on the history of anti-Semitism, how anti-Semitism presents itself, and action students can take to prevent and report anti-Semitic behavior and if.
That woman's going to get it from me at some point today.
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss that. We are in the midst of making certain that all anti-bigotry efforts ensure education about anti-Semitism. We committed to that into September, and we're working through that. We've added education. Some parts of our program do, and some parts of our program need to be enhanced. So we're working on that right now, and I assure you that we will make certain that that is included in all of our anti-bigotry efforts, anti-Semitism.
That is much appreciated. I wonder if that type of education would have been in place at all of our college campuses before this, whether we would have seen the massive reactions that we have that are just hard to describe and justify in terms of the demonstrations and just the hate. Ed, as part of the recent protests on and around campus, there have been dozens of arrests made by university police, including several related to terroristic threats. Does the university plan on requiring
totally
students,
gonna be
faculty,
that
or
guy.
staff arrested as part of these protests
Those
to
for
receive
bissing
further
an
education on
anti-Semitic.
anti-Semitic behavior?
Get off my lawn.
Congressman, is that a question for me?
It is. I'm sorry, please.
Well, we're very committed to making sure everyone understands history and anti-Semitism for sure. The description of the arrests, I'd need to learn a little bit more about.
Well, the requests that have occurred, obviously, related to protests involving faculty or staff, students. The question is, within the consequences, when university police are the ones that are intervening, whether there's any thoughts to further education for those individuals regarding anti-Semitic behavior and the impacts of it.
It's certainly consistent with my perspective and my values and the institution's values. I wonder if I could follow up with your team about the specifics of these arrests, because I don't know exactly what you're speaking about, but I agree with you that anyone who was arrested for an activity that was anti-Semitic, some act or something else, harassment, intimidation, should certainly receive
This is so
education
stupid.
in addition to other
They're
consequences.
not addressing
Or
the
some
actual
criminal
problem.
activity they were arrested for.
The actual
was
problem
obviously
is how
driven
these
by
schools are
anti-Semitic
teaching.
beliefs and expressions.
This data.
Several faculty members at Penn recently provided support for the boycott,
That's part
divestment,
of
and
being
sanctions for the BDS movement. The movement
Pretending
requires
that that's not
boycotting
invariably
Israeli
gonna lead towards
universities and
Jew hatred.
individuals who are complicit
Stupid.
in what they consider Israeli government misconduct.
Instead of blaming
Therefore, it is
Charlottesville. As
impossible
if
for
Charlottesville is
faculty
what
member,
inspired these students,
to
right?
support
Morons.
BDS and treat Israeli
Yeah,
academics
Charlottesville.
fairly.
That's what
Can you
that's
tell
what
this
got these
committee
students riled up. They're like, we
unequivocally
want to
that
be
no
just
such
like Charlottesville.
discrimination has taken place?
Friggin' idiots.
I appreciate the opportunity to clarify a very clear position that the University of Pennsylvania has had for many years, which is we strongly oppose boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning Israel. We have many flourishing it's contrary to academic freedom, among other things. It's singling out one state and treating it differently than others. We have many academic collaborations with universities in Israel. They're terrific collaborations. We're very clear on BDS. We are opposed to it, and our practices make that clear.
So as a part
What
of that, and
percentage
I'm
of
a strong
college
supporter of the
students are
right to free
right-wingers?
speech, including on college campuses. Does University of Pennsylvania have any policies or procedures in place to ensure that BDS supporters cannot implement their boycott positions in their official capacities, or not given such individuals administrative powers to begin with?
Well, it's the position of the institution that we do not engage in boycotting, sanctioning, or divesting. And I would think that would follow for any member of the organization who is acting in their official capacity. But if you have specifics that I could follow up on after this hearing, I would very much like to hear them.
We'll do that. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Bonamici, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I appreciate the full committee's focus on this issue. I want to reiterate, as I did in the other hearing we had recently, that anti-Semitism, as well as Islamophobia and other forms of bigotry based on race, ethnicity, national origin, or religion are abhorrent and must not be tolerated. I'm deeply troubled by recent anti-Semitic incidents at colleges and universities across the country, including those whose presidents are here today. And I stand with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in calling for proactive steps from all of these institutions of higher education
Of
to
course,
root
it
out
had to do
discrimination,
with
hatred,
this.
and bigotry
Plus,
in
they
all
were
of its
all right
forms.
wingers,
I also
and all
want
these
to note
college
that the
students are
main
left
point of this
wingers.
hearing should be
They
to
they
identify
hate,
bipartisan solutions to
despise the
combat
Charlottesville people.
anti-Semitism,
We're
not
not
an
trying to
excuse
emulate
to
them.
attack higher
The
education,
stupidest
liberal
thing in
arts
the world.
education, or important diversity, equity, and inclusion work that's happening at colleges and universities
Diversity.
across the
Shut up,
country.
you idiots.
There are legitimate
We're gonna-
concerns
we're
about
gonna turn this
anti-Semitism on
problem
college
into our
campuses, and that's
agenda.
what we should focus on
Can't
today.
stand
Not
these
doing
people.
so is a disservice to the students across
You're
the
a
country
disservice to
who
our
are
country.
looking to Congress for support for and the public for the institutions.
You suck.
So during the previous hearing, I highlighted my support for additional funding for the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, and I want to join Representative Courtney in repeating that request today. OCR will be better able to enforce Title VI violations and protect students' civil rights with adequate staff and investigatory capacity. So I want to make that clear. We must do that. Dr. Nadel, thank you for being here and for your work over the years. Public colleges and universities, as we know, must uphold constitutional free speech rights. And many private institutions also recognize the value of free speech and robust debate. I think all of our presidents recognize that today, but also with the understanding that schools cannot allow their campuses to become places where anti-Semitic speech makes students unsafe or feel unsafe. I think that's recognized. So, Dr. Nadel, what are some of the best ways that colleges and universities can work to make their
The
campuses
left all
welcome, safe,
going
and
to this
inclusive
idiot
spaces
Dr.
for all
Nadel.
students
Shut up.
in light of incidences of hate
Well, we
speech
should
and
condemn
discrimination,
Charlottesville.
while also adhering to First Amendment principles?
So thank you for the question. I think there are different forms and different venues
Miraculously.
for expanding this discussion of the very difficult issue that has sparked and ignited the anti-Semitism or the outbursts on college campuses that we've been seeing since October 7th. So one form obviously is the classroom, although I would remind the members of the committee that the reality is that most students during their college career, they take a handful of courses. Many of them are studying STEM, and most of them are actually never in classrooms where they're hearing a discussion of issues like anti-Semitism or the conflict in Israel and Palestine. So that's the first thing that I would point out. So academics, we academics can continue to foster those conversations, and we need to take them outside of the classroom. I think the other place where there can really be a lot of work done that would be very successful is on the side of student life on campus. And so student organizations are, they range broadly and widely on the campus, everything from a gardening club to obviously some of the student organizations that have been involved in the protests against Israel. So these are other places.
I don't want to cut you off, but
Yeah.
I have to get another question
Oh,
in.
yeah,
I'm running
sure.
out of time, but thank you
Okay.
for your work. And I also want to recognize as well the AJC action plan for confronting campus anti-Semitism. President Gay, I understand that there's an ongoing investigation of your institution by OCR because of anti-Semitic incidents that occurred on campus. And I know we'll be closely monitoring the outcome, but in the interim and over the long term, what can Congress do to support your institution and other colleges in preventing discrimination? And also, if you could also respond in the brief time, you mentioned that Harvard will not permit speech that incites violence or threatens safety. And I'd like you also to address who decides that and how and in what time frame.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for your questions. You're correct that there is an ongoing investigation, and obviously I can't comment on an active investigation other than to say we will work with the office to answer all of their questions. And I will say the work of the office is vitally important for ensuring students have access to educational opportunities. So I fully support the work that they do and hope that the office gets the resources that it needs to be effective. With respect to I believe the question was about student conduct. So again, we are deeply committed to free expression,
But we have
but
no answer for
when
this problem.
speech crosses over into conduct that violates our policies, policies against bullying, harassment, intimidation, we do take action. And we do have faculty-led student disciplinary
When's the last
processes
time
that
that
are quite
happened?
robust. And even over the last couple of months, as there have been incidents,
Okay.
we've been leaning into those processes, and we do have disciplinary actions underway.
Thank you. My time has expired. I yield back.
I now recognize Mr. Wahlberg for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks to the panel for being here. These are difficult times and difficult subjects, but they need to be addressed because leadership matters. And you are leaders in academia, at your institutions as well. And leadership matters. President Gay, I was taken by some words in your opening statement where you said, cure for anti-Semitism is knowledge. I would go where angels fear to tread and suggest that it might be better going back to the original motto idea for Harvard, which was Veritas, truth, that the cure for anti-Semitism is not simply knowledge, it's truth. Knowledge puffs up. Knowledge sometimes is based upon falsehoods. I think that's what we're facing right now in the climate on campuses, is that we're missing the fact of truth and allowing, under the guise of free speech, knowledge that isn't true to be exhibited in actions as well. So President Gay, in the weeks since October 7th, and again in your testimony, you have said that Harvard's commitment to free speech extends to views that are objectionable or outrageous. Are you aware that Harvard is ranked dead last on the 2024 Foundation of Individual Rights and Expression scorecard of universities on freedom of speech?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. Respectfully, I disagree with that perspective as represented in the report that you cited. I don't think it's an accurate representation of how Harvard treats speech on campus. We are committed to free expression and to making space for a wide range of views and perspectives on our campus.
With all due respect, let me move on a bit.
Bedrock.
I would expect that you wouldn't agree with that. I understand that. And I would expect that the University of Penn, the same would be true, that you wouldn't agree that you're second to last on that same scorecard. But President Gay, did you know that 70% of Harvard students say that shouting down a speaker is acceptable?
That is not okay.
Well, then what is that the situation?
It seems that
why is that
Harvard's commitment to free speech is pretty selective. As you are no doubt aware, prominent alumnus Bill Ackman tweeted you a letter on Sunday, and in that letter, and I have that tweet, I guess that's the beauty of social media, you can get those things. In that letter, he highlighted 2 cases of Harvard faculty members who were canceled because of views deemed too controversial for your campus. Tyler J. Vanderweel was deemed guilty for those crimes related to his views on marriage and abortion. And then Carol Hoven, an evolutionary biologist, was forced to resign because she stated that a person's sex is biological and binary. Mr. Ackerman's letter also included quotes from a number of faculty highlighting the culture of fear that pervades Harvard's campus for those with views out of step with campus. And so, President Gay, one world is a call for violence against Jews protected speech, but a belief that sex is biological and binary isn't.
Thank you for your question.
If you hear that noise in the background,
those
are
students arrive on campus, whether it is to begin their Harvard journey as an undergraduate or at one of the professional schools, the message to them is clear, that we are an inclusive community, but one deeply committed to free expression. And that means that we have expectations that that right is exercised mindfully and with empathy towards others. We reinforce that during their time at Harvard by helping them build the skills that allow them to engage in constructive dialogue, even on the most complex and divisive issues. Because what we seek is not simply free expression, but the reasoned dialogue that leads to truth and discovery, and that does the work of moving us all forward. We don't always get it right, and our students don't
I'll
always
mute
get it right.
myself.
And when they
Fine.
transgress, they're held accountable.
Well, don't they?
Yeah,
The
her last name's
professors
really
come under
good.
that as well, don't they? And
Absolutely.
so for Professor Vanderweel and Hoven, that didn't work for them. The free expression of views, at the very least, views, whether fact or truth, I guess we'll leave that to understanding, but nonetheless, they were removed from their positions. And I think that sends a message in this case with Jewish students,
Damn Skippy.
that they're of less importance. I yield back.
Mr. Chicano, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being
I
here.
liked
do
Marky
wish
Mark
we
there.
Could meet under different circumstances. President Gay, many individuals hold that Harvard did not condemn the attack against Israel swiftly enough. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to briefly react. Can you tell us why the university did not react as quickly as other universities might have, or others
What
might
happened to
hope
this guy's
Harvard would
nose?
have?
I feel like I'm staring into his
Thank you,
brain.
Congressman, for the question. And respectfully, the notion that Harvard did not react is not correct. From the moment I learned of the attacks on October 7th, I was focused on action to ensure that our students were supported and safe. On that first day, we were focused on identifying whether we had any students or faculty who were in Israel and needed our assistance, including in getting out. On October 8th, I joined students and other members of the Jewish community at Harvard Hillel for a solidarity dinner to be there in support and also to learn more what their needs were.
Their needs are that they
In
need
the
to find
days-
Torah because
in the days
that was a
after,
Jewish holiday.
Not
They shouldn't
only
have been
did
there.
I condemn the attacks, I've continued to condemn the attacks, and furthermore, have continued to stay in conversation with our Jewish community on campus about their evolving needs so that to ensure that the university is providing them with the support that they need during this very challenging time.
Thank you, President Gay. Do you consider yourself a subject matter expert on anti-Semitic behavior?
Excuse me, could you repeat that question?
Do
I
you
didn't-
consider yourself an expert on anti-Semitic behavior, subject matter expert?
No, I don't, but I know this, that anti-Semitism is hate or suspicion of Jews. And that is all I need to know to take action to address it on our campus.
Thank you. Real quickly, other than Professor Nadal, do other witnesses consider themselves to be experts on anti-Semitism? Just a simple yes or no.
No, I do not.
No, I do not, but I learn.
Thank you. Well, my point is that this is the second legislative hearing on this topic in a month, and the majority has failed to bring forth any witnesses who can speak on how to address this issue and how to take concrete steps to combat anti-Semitism. President Gay, it is my understanding that you have communicated to the Harvard community some of the specific steps you are implementing to combat anti-Semitism and continue to foster student
They need
and
to get
community
me.
engagement.
Get me.
You've already
I'll
mentioned a
give
few
them
of the things that you've done
answers.
since
I
September,
got
but can you
answers
highlight
for
some of
you.
these steps?
Okay?
Thank
I
you
got
for the
answers.
question. So I've had repeated communications with the campus community about the steps that we're taking, both immediate steps and longer-term action towards combating anti-Semitism. To begin, we've focused on enhancing the physical safety of the campus and the campus community. That includes an increased police presence, both plainclothes and uniformed officers, 24/7 threat monitoring, both on campus and
Not just the
online,
problem. Not just the
coordination
problem.
on a daily
You're just
basis
trying-
with state,
You're trying
local,
to
and
fence
federal
in
law
the
enforcement.
ocean that you keep
And when
throwing
necessary,
animal
we've
water
taken
to.
the steps of
Idiots.
closing the gates to Harvard Yard to limit the ability of outside actors to use our campus as a platform. We've also made it easier
No, it's not
for
the outside
students or any
actors,
community
it's the
member to
inside
report
actors.
concerns.
That's the problem.
And any kind of conduct that is
No,
threatening.
definitely not a police
We've
state.
also enhanced
No,
counseling
it's
and mental
actually
health
educating
services,
them with actual,
including
you know,
trauma-informed care.
information.
We've created community spaces so that students and faculty and staff can gather and to be together to process the tragedy. We're
I
also
muted
working on.
myself so you guys
Excuse me,
wouldn't hear the
President Gay,
stupid
thank you.
lawnmower. And then when I
Are
start
these
going
actions
off, you're like,
only
why is
intended
Joe
to
screaming when
assist
he's
Jewish
muted?
students?
These are resources that we're making broadly available to our community, but we're being particularly mindful to make sure that they are responsive to the needs of our Jewish community, as well as our Muslim, Arab, and Palestinian students who are also experiencing tremendous grief and are also fearful and distraught during this time.
But President Gay, universities stand as centers of thought, and it is of the utmost importance to strike a balance between First Amendment speech protections and the safety of students and faculty. But when speech crosses into the line of conduct, crosses the line into conduct, it's essential that universities act swiftly. Harvard is a private university, and private IHEs have different parameters to operate under than public IHEs. Does this give Harvard a pass to avoid protecting free speech?
We are deeply committed to protecting free expression, even of views that we find objectionable and outrageous and offensive. But when that expression crosses into conduct that violates our policies around bullying, harassment, intimidation, threats,
Yes, her name is
we
Gay.
take action, and we do not hesitate to take action.
Thank you. My time is up, and I yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chicano. Mr. Grossman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on some of the things Mr. Wilson had to say. Just playing around here a little bit on the internet. In 2016, they found about 2% of the faculty of Harvard were viewed President Trump, I think, as okay or good. And I think in the 2020 election, the Crimson, your local paper there, found 1% of the students voting for Donald Trump, which given that nationwide is about 50-50, was kind of shocking. Does it concern you at all that you apparently have a great deal, a lack of ideological diversity at Harvard? And do you think
that's manifesting in Jew?
One of the reasons why
this is what Republicans should point out. That's what they should be blasting
at your institution.
For all your really liberal leftist students
Is
seem
that-
to have
is that
a
question
great deal
for
of
you?
Jew
That's the
hatred,
question for you.
more
Yeah,
so
and
than
I'll
anywhere
ask
else
you,
in the
what are you
country.
going to do about it? Do you think it's a concern?
So we strive to have as
I'd let them go wherever they want to
diverse
go.
a faculty as we can.
Any
Because
of them
we
could
want to
have
make
gone.
sure that we are sampling
chose not
from
to,
the
though.
broadest pool of talent available in the world. That's how we ensure academic excellence. And we then
From what I read here, maybe they're making stuff up, but I don't think they're making it up. We said 2% of your faculty viewed Donald Trump as something other poor in 2016, and after 4 years of working for diversity, 1% voted for him. Now, I know all sorts of good people who don't like President Trump, but I'm just saying, when you compare the way people think at your campus compared to America as a whole, if there's one thing you are, it's not diverse.
I'm having a party tonight,
Right?
Lesko.
You
Having a whole bunch
consider
of
that a
folks. I'm starting at
problem,
9
or
o'clock. I hope you'll be able to make it.
The numbers I gave you?
Massive party
So,
tonight.
Congressman, I can't speak to
Massive
the
party.
specific data that you are referring to.
I'm
What I
celebrating.
can say is that at Harvard, we try to create as much space as possible for a wide range of views and perspectives, because we believe that allows for a thriving academic community.
How in the world is that even possible? And that you're trying to do that? Do you really feel that your faculty are ideologically diverse? You came out of a political science background at Stanford?
At Stanford, as an undergraduate, as an economics major, and then for my PhD, it was a PhD in political science.
Political
yes.
science, that's what I thought. Did you experience what you would say, given America's divided now 50-50, about 50-50, or was it 75-25 or 90-10 regarding to more a constitutional conservative perspective or more of a left-wing perspective? What is your experience both at Harvard and Stanford?
So here's what I can say on the topic that you're exploring.
Exploring
And it's,
or making obvious?
we want the most brilliant, talented
That's crap.
faculty
Lies.
to come to
Complete
Harvard
lie. That's
and
not
to build
true.
their careers.
No, you
They
don't.
only give me five. You're not going to answer the question. They only give me 5 minutes. Is it common at Harvard to ask faculty to submit a diversity statement?
That's a practice that varies across schools at Harvard.
So sometimes you do. Well,
In some cases, there are schools that ask for that.
okay, could a scientist ever get cut from consideration from a job because they had the wrong view of diversity?
What I would say is that we aim to draw to our faculty
Yeah, okay, I'll put
the
it this way.
broadest pool of
When you hear that,
You're ignoring
this
it.
is not the way I wanted this to go. But
You're
when you hear
eliminating
that
anyone who
1%
comes
of your
before.
faculty voted for a presidential candidate who got about 50% of the vote nationwide. Does that concern you, or do you feel you're not as diverse as you should be?
What I'm focused on is making sure that we're bringing the most academically talented faculty to our campus and that they
Okay.
are effective in the classroom.
I'll give you one more question because I want to go to the gal from Penn. Has Harvard ever made a faculty job contingent on a strong diversity statement?
We look at everything a faculty member will bring to our campus.
Okay.
Academic brilliance and excitement and ability to teach a campus community and
Okay,
student
now
community
I
is
want to go to
diverse.
Miss McGill. I have a friend whose son goes to the University of Pennsylvania. Right now, he is physically afraid to go to the library at night. Okay, just unbelievable. Could you, I mean, I just can't even conceive that's going on in the United States of America, but that's what she tells me. She doesn't make it up. Could you give us your reasons as to why that is true at Pennsylvania, why today a Jewish student is afraid to walk to the library at night?
Congressman, let me start by saying I'm devastated to hear that, and the safety and security of our campus and our students in particular is my top concern. I would, if you would be willing, I would like to talk to your constituent and their Penn student. I'm very troubled by what you're reporting. It's our top priority to keep our students safe and secure.
I'm going to have to ask you to follow up on that with Mr. Grossman and with the rest of the committee. Ms. Adams, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming today and to testify before the committee. But before I get started, I want to just thank you for your service to students and to the university community. Dr. Nadell, this question is for you. I'm glad, first of all, to see another Buckeye here, Ohio State. But as a former professor at a small college in North Carolina, Bennett College, for over 40 years I taught there, I am deeply disappointed by the rise of anti-Semitism rhetoric that's happening across the country. Anti-Semitism has no place on our college campuses or anywhere. And it's been my mission to combat instances of anti-Semitism and hate and racism alike. There are Jewish students across this country that are afraid to leave their dorms, afraid to step on campus because of the hateful rhetoric that's infiltrated our schools. So this question is to actually all the presidents, but I did want Dr. Nadell to answer first. Students should be able to express their views and opinions without fear of retaliation. How are you balancing the protection of free speech, academic freedom with the need to also oppose normalizing anti-Semitism attitudes that are radical and dangerous? And if we could just briefly answer that, I want to hear from the presidents on this.
Sure. So just briefly, obviously, we need to protect free speech, but we also need to protect the safety of our students on campus. And you use the word normalizing anti-Semitism. And the problem is anti-Semitism has been normalized in the nation, not just on
You're
campus.
an idiot. You're an idiot. Because it's much worse in campuses, much worse in campuses, which are 90 to 95% Democrats. And you're blaming Charlottesville like some stupid leftist moron.
Making students and frankly the entire campus community
so humiliated
more
by how
aware
you're sitting here advocating
the
for
insidiousness of anti-Semitism,
while making
so that they're in a
worse.
position to be able to recognize anti-Semitic
Worst
tropes when they see them
imaginable.
and confront them in the moment.
The humiliation your whole life is. Your existence is humiliation.
I appreciate the question. At Penn, our policies are guided by the U.S. Constitution. So our longstanding open expression guidelines follow the Constitution. I think in addition to education, which I agree with, so that students and faculty and staff can identify and combat anti-Semitic tropes in speech, I think it's important to call out anti-Semitism in a very visible and public way and a specific way in order to make clear how it's contrary to the values of the institution.
A lot of them are very
where we're talking
talented.
about speech alone.
Thank you. So Title VI provisions set the standard for what should be done to address racism, hate crimes, and violence on campuses. Do you think that your DEI departments are equipped with the tools to combat
DEI
anti-Semitism
makes it
or hate
worse,
on your
you
campus?
stupid
And if
idiots.
not, what changes do you plan to make? This is
I can't stand
for
these
all the
people. Like
presidents.
literally, how can we twist this problem into making it a worse problem by promoting our
can jump
stupid
in here.
agenda?
Yes.
Yes, so our diversity, equity, and inclusion staff are absolutely charged with making the campus a
DEI is
welcoming for
specifically
all students,
not designed
and
to
that
protect
absolutely
Jews. So this
includes
is such
Jewish
a
and
red
Israeli
herring.
students. We absolutely
Even if it
see
did protect Jews, it would
anti-Semitism
just
as an inclusion issue.
it would BF
We're
them
making sure
worse
that
than
our
anything
staff who
imaginable.
are
But it's not
dedicated
even
to diversity,
pretending to
equity, and
do that.
inclusion are being
Stupid.
trained about anti-Semitism, but
it's
it goes well
DEI
beyond
is about
that
hate
staff.
on all
It's
white
important
people,
that our
and in that
leadership
context, Jews are
understands
considered white people. So
anti-Semitism,
shut up.
that our students and faculty understand anti-Semitism. And I'll just say one thing about MIT. We can make as many top-down initiatives as we want, but the heartening thing is that the discussion of anti-Semitism and indeed Islamophobia is now proceeding at a grassroots level.
So
at
can we hear
MIT.
from?
The disheartening
Thank you
thing
very
is
much.
that you
Next
people like you are
president.
running these schools, and people like this woman, like this hat woman, are in
Our
Congress.
anti-bigotry efforts are also informed by a desire to make certain every person at the university feels welcome and can thrive, and that includes communities of faith and ethnicity. That's the value we have, and we're making sure that is from the top of the organization all through the organization. And I believe over the longer term, that's sort of an immediate action. Over the longer term, making sure the entire community is discussing, understanding, and capable of calling out and combating anti-Semitism when they see it.
Thank you, Madam President.
Our DEI office is a resource for the entire community, and the professionals in that office are
What the
committed
hell
to
is
ensuring
DEI
that everyone feels a
anti-Semitism?
sense of belonging. But in
Shut up.
building on
Such
an
a lie.
observation that President Kornbluth made, this is a shared responsibility that doesn't vest strictly in the hands of our DEI professionals.
It's got
but
nothing
it really
to do
is
with
work
DEI.
that needs to be
Be
taken up
honest.
by the
It's got nothing
entire
to do with
community,
DEI.
the leadership
Nor
for
should it.
sure,
I
but
don't want
also
anything
the
to do with
faculty
DEI.
and
This is
the
your
students,
Democrat red herring
and
about how
also
great
doing
DEI
the work.
is. We need more
Thank you very much.
DEI.
I'm out of time, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Stefanik, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Dr. Gay, a Harvard student calling for the mass murder of African Americans is not protected free speech at Harvard, correct?
Our commitment to
It's a
free
yes or no
speech-
question. Is that corrected? Is that okay for students to call for the mass murder of African Americans at Harvard? Is that protected free speech?
Our commitment to free speech.
It's a yes or no
extends-
question. Let me ask you this. You are president of Harvard, so I assume you're familiar with the term intifada, correct?
I've heard that term, yes.
And you understand that the use of the term intifada in the context of the Israeli-Arab conflict is indeed a call for violent armed resistance against the state of Israel, including violence against civilians and the genocide of Jews. Are you aware of that?
That type of hateful speech is personally
or
abhorrent
no?
to me.
And there have been multiple marches at Harvard with students chanting, quote, "There is only one solution, intifada revolution," and, quote, "globalize the intifada." Is that correct?
I've heard that thoughtless, reckless, and hateful language on our campus, yes.
So based upon your testimony, you understand that this call for intifada is to commit genocide against the Jewish people in Israel and globally, correct?
I will say again, that type of hateful speech
It's yes
is
or no.
personally abhorrent to me.
Yeah, but
Do you
do nothing
believe
about
that
it.
type of hateful
You don't
speech
care.
is contrary to Harvard's code of conduct, or is it allowed at Harvard?
It is at odds with the values of Harvard.
Well, no,
Can
it's
you
not.
not
Our
say here that
values
it is against the
also-
code of conduct at Harvard?
We embrace a commitment to free expression, even of views that are objectionable, offensive, hateful.
Yeah,
It's
but you're
when
teaching
that
them to be.
speech
You're teaching
crosses
them
into
to think
conduct
that way.
that
That's
violates
the
our
issue.
policies against bullying, harassment.
Does that
are
speech
teaching
not
them.
cross that barrier? Does that speech not call for
Forget
the
about the
genocide of
speech.
Jews and the
Stop trying to
elimination
clamp
of
down on the
Israel?
speech. Clamp down on what's
When
teaching
that
them to say
Testify
that.
that you understand that
Elise,
is the
stop
definition of
it.
intifada.
Elise, stop worrying about the free speech element
Is
and
that
worry about
speech
what's
according to
causing
the
that
code of
speech, which is
conduct or
these
not?
schools. God.
We embrace a commitment to free expression and give a wide berth to
She's
free
one of the better
expression,
ones, and
even
she's
of
blowing
views
this.
that are objectionable,
You
worried
and I
about the
both know that's not the
speech.
case. You are aware that Harvard ranked dead last when it came to free speech. Are you not aware of that report?
As I observed earlier, I reject that characterization.
It's the
of our
data shows
campus.
it's true. And isn't it true that Harvard previously rescinded multiple offers of admissions for applicants and accepted freshmen for sharing offensive memes, racist statements, sometimes as young as 16 years old? Did Harvard not rescind those offers of admission?
That long predates my time as president.
But you
so I can't
understand
speak.
that Harvard made that decision to rescind those offers of admission.
I have no reason to contradict the facts as you present them. here.
Correct, because it's a fact. You're also aware that a Winthrop House faculty dean was
Yeah.
let go over who he chose to legally
That would be
represent, correct? That was while you were dean.
That is an incorrect characterization of what transpired.
What's the characterization?
I'm not going to get into details
Why
about
not?
a personnel matter.
Well, let me ask you this. Will admissions offers be rescinded or any disciplinary action be taken against students or applicants who say, from the river to the sea or Intifada, advocating for the murder of Jews?
As I've said, that type of hateful, reckless, offensive speech is
So if it's
personally
against gay
abhorrent to
people
me.
or against blacks, then
And today that no
When-
action will be taken. What action will be taken?
When speech crosses into conduct that violates our policies, including policies against bullying, harassment, or intimidation, we take action. And we have robust disciplinary processes that allow us to hold individuals accountable.
What action has been taken against students who are harassing and calling for the genocide of Jews on Harvard's campus?
I can assure you, we have robust
What
disciplinary
actions have been
processes
taken?
Give an example.
I'm not
with
asking.
actions underway.
I'm
example.
asking what actions have been taken against
Given-
those students.
Given students' rights to privacy and our obligations under FERPA,
You didn't ask
I will
for
not
names.
say more about any specific cases other than
that's such a BS.
to reiterate that processes are ongoing.
That's a lie.
Do you know what the number one
not
hate
right.
crime in America is?
I know that over the last couple of months, there's been an alarming rise of anti-Semitism, which I understand is the critical topic that we are here to discuss.
That's correct. It is anti-Jewish hate crimes. And Harvard ranks the lowest when it comes to protecting Jewish students. This is why I've called for your resignation. And your testimony today, not being able to answer with moral clarity, speaks volumes. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back.
That was pretty
Norcross is
entertaining.
Not here. Ms. Jayapal, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
It's not about. I don't like
Thank
how
you,
Lisa's
Madam
fixating
Chair.
on the speech. It's more about
The
the
Anti-Defamation
school
League
teaching them
found
to
that
think
reports of
way.
anti-Semitism have nearly quadrupled since this point last year, and we're
Oh, here
seeing
we
that
go.
reflected on
Ms.
college
Jayapal.
campuses, with Jewish students reporting that they feel unsafe. No
Why
student
she
should
looks like
feel
a yeast
unsafe. I think
infection.
we all agree. Anti-Semitism and indeed all forms of hate have to be rejected everywhere. And while all of
And
you
here we
as
go.
college administrators
Switch
have a
it to
responsibility
Islamophobia.
to condemn hate and
Switch it
acts
to
of hate
Islamophobia.
in all its forms, including anti-Semitism, I know that you also face the challenge of and the responsibility of ensuring that people can engage in healthy debates of ideas in a way that fosters safety and inclusion for everyone. So I want to thank you for your commitments to work to ensure a continued diversity of perspectives on your campuses, a diversity of faculty with varied lived
Yes.
experiences.
Yes.
I know that my Republican
the
colleagues
House,
have been
though.
trying to attack DEI initiatives, including the funding for those initiatives, for some time. And I hope that that is clear in terms of some of the comments that have been made.
What the hell's DEI
I want
have
to
to
just
do with
give
this?
Dr. Gay 30 seconds to respond to anything, given the line of questioning that you had right before, in case you wanted to say anything before I go to my lines of question.
Thank you for the opportunity, but I'm satisfied that I've conveyed our deep commitment to free expression,
Totally conveyed.
recognizing that
Totally
it's
conveyed.
uncomfortable.
Thank you, Dr. Gay. Dr. Kornbluth, your institution is one of many that has responded to incidents between pro-Israel and pro-Palestine groups. Many college campuses have been grappling with their responses to prevent anti-Semitism, to prevent Islamophobia
I
and
told
other
you.
forms of
I
hate, while
told
also
you.
making sure that
I
every
told
student
you.
feels safe to express their thoughts in accordance with the principles of free speech and to engage in the idea of critical thought on college campuses, which I think is what many of us appreciated about our college
But
experiences.
they don't
Can
encourage
you
critical
speak to
thought
the
anymore, you
challenges
airheaded
that you've
bits.
faced in condemning hate and acts of hate while making sure that students were heard? And also just want to appreciate the distinction that you made in one of your comments between what we can say and what we should say. And just say that, frankly, I think there's been an explosion, thanks to the previous president in part, that has shattered the norms of what is acceptable to say. And we're dealing with some of the effects of that. But what challenges have you faced in condemning hate and acts of hate while making sure students were heard?
Thank you so much. And I have to
And
say,
if you can just pull that microphone
I'm
right up to
sorry.
you, that would be great.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I have to say my absolute goal is to ensure the safety of students and the continuity of our research and educational missions. And these recent events have troubled me deeply, and we have mobilized as a campus. I think the most important thing is first knowledge, to understand that, as I mentioned in a previous answer, that our leadership, our students, and our faculty have to have knowledge. But way more importantly right now is these students are thrown together in classrooms and laboratories and dormitories every day. This is where the dialogue is taking place. And we have to ensure that they have the tools for constructive communication across differences. We are bringing these discussions to the dormitories. We have a Center for Constructive Engagement where the students are going to be able to have small roundtable discussions with each other. We have funded and mobilized, and I cannot tell you how wonderful our faculty have been. They've just issued a statement from 300 faculty about unity and working together with the students. And so there have been lunches, there have been meetings for our Israeli and Jewish students with Jewish faculty, for our Arab and Muslim students with Arab and Muslim faculty, but now they're working to figure out how to bring them together. If we're all going to live and work together productively, we have to move beyond, formal training, which we are committed to, but to actual real dialogue and to actually model constructive and civil dialogue for our
It's hard
students.
to do that when
That's
everyone
what
on your
being in
everyone
university
in your
is all about.
faculty is left
Very
leaning.
powerful. Professor Nadel, these challenges of protecting free speech while denouncing anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, all forms of hate.
See? Every time.
That's not unique to MIT or to the institutions that are here. Can you speak to the same question of the most effective ways to facilitate education and dialogue to ease tensions at other colleges and in general?
The most effective ways, and obviously I very much appreciate your question, because this is happening across the United States on colleges and campuses, small and large. And the most effective ways are to recognize the many different levels and mechanisms for facilitating these dialogues at the student level, at the faculty level, at the administrative level, and bringing how to unite the campus, bringing the campus together. That's what we're all trying to do, and it doesn't happen overnight.
Thank you all so much for your work. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank each of you for being here today. And first, my colleague earlier asked the question, what is the truth? Of course, that question was asked 2,000 years ago of Pilate. And of course, obviously knowledge is important, but what about wisdom? In full disclosure, I am a student and believe in the God of the Bible and his word. In the House of Representatives, we're without excuse. We have above the American flag, "In God We Trust." Really? And then we have the full face of Moses looking down on the entire body, who gave us the first 5 books of the Bible. Let me tell you how serious this issue is. In 1885 BC, not AD, BC, the Bible says, Genesis 12:3, I will bless, talking about Israel, I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. That is a serious, serious promise. In fact, we heard one of the panelists talk about the Jesus of the Bible. And of course, our church was founded by Jesus, who was a Jew, the American church. In fact, the church throughout the world. You know, this is the Committee of Education and Workforce. Illiteracy is the #1 problem in our workforce. But I think from a standpoint of truth, biblical illiteracy is the #1 problem in America. We are a biblically illiterate society. We have no idea about these promises that are ancient in this book, that the prophecies, every one of them, has come to fruition. Every single one of them. So with that, Dr. McGill, like so many others, I've been extremely
I don't think he's going to get anyone on that panel to agree with
I'm
him.
sorry, Dr. Cornbluff, is that correct? Okay.
Kornbluth.
At MIT, Israeli and Jewish students were blocked from attending class by pro-Palestinian protests at the school's main entrance. The protests violated campus rules when the school ordered all protesters to leave the area or face suspension. The contingent Jewish counter-protesters left. The pro-Palestinians stayed. Can you explain how that is fair to Jewish American citizens whose rights are being violated when you said because we later heard serious concerns about collateral consequences for students such as visas and that sort of thing? Can you explain yourself there?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. I have to say, when we started this protest, when the protest rather was started, I ordered a police presence to ensure safety, and we de-escalated when it was prudent. In a very tense situation among students, we avoided altercations and we kept everyone safe. And we are now entering into a process of ensuring accountability. Now, with respect to the consequences, we strive for outcomes that are proportional to the transgression. In this case, violation of our time, place, and manner rules for demonstration.
And they
I
can't
want to
even
make
admit
one comment, though,
how
about people attending
tilted they are.
classes. First of all, at no time.
Well, I'm limited on time here, so could you submit that to us in writing? I
Absolutely.
have
Wrap it up,
another question
wrap it up,
here.
sugar.
In fact,
I got more
you know,
questions.
going back to talking about wisdom, Proverbs 9:10 says, "The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom." And so with that, President Gay and President McGill, do either of you plan to suspend foreign students who violate the law or school policies?
Thank you for your question. Our international students are a vibrant part of our community and contribute significantly to Harvard's strength and are a real source of pride. But all of our students, irrespective of their citizenship, are held accountable to following our policies, including our policies around bullying, harassment, and intimidation. And we hold them accountable for that.
Okay, well, Dr. McGill, if you'll submit those in writing, and I have a few other questions I'd like for y'all to answer. Thank you for being here. And
Yes, sir.
Chair, I
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Ms. Wild, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I so wish that this hearing was one where we were having a robust intellectual discussion, taking advantage of the brilliant minds that we have in front of us about free speech, the limits of free speech and so forth. I fear that we have gotten away from that. I think the one thing that everybody in this room would agree on is that not all speech is protected or acceptable. For example, when elected officials lie, that's unacceptable. And that sometimes means that they have to be removed from academic institutions.
Wow,
where
that's
they
really
may serve
on topic,
boards,
talking
or
about
in the case of
Santos.
Harvard,
You stupid.
the Senior Advisory Committee, based on false claims of election fraud.
Oh my God.
But moving on to the subject of this hearing,
Get
let me
out
just
of your
say, as a Jewish mother of
freaking
2 students who are now fully launched, and I had to send off to college not so many years ago, I am very, very sympathetic to the concerns of the students and the parents about their safety, emotionally, physically, and otherwise. And it's not just about anti-Semitism. It's about all forms of hate speech, whether it's anti-LGBT,
Stupid left.
Islamophobia, whatever it is.
I got a
racist
soapbox
language.
now.
Our
They gave me a
students
soapbox for
deserve
like the Jew hatred. Let me
place
talk
of
about
safety,
LGBT and like
and again,
BLM.
emotionally and physically. But at the same time, I think of college as the place where we learn to think critically. And to me, that's the most
sad
important
that
part
you
of
wait till
going to
college to learn to think critically.
So here we are in this strange balancing
pretty
act, and I
sad.
believe me, I
You should
feel
learn
for
to
all
think
of you
critically,
because
like when you're
it is a
6.
balancing act that you have to perform. So at what
So you're starting like
point
15 years too late, honey.
do we determine, or do you determine that speech is such that it incites violence or it constitutes hate speech? And I'm going to ask
There's no such thing as hate
President McGill from my home state of Pennsylvania. You saw a video at the beginning of this, and
no such
to the
thing.
extent that the protests at Penn were referenced, did you see that video as an example of hate speech or speech that would incite violence?
I appreciate the question.
Speech
from
that
the
incites
representative
violence
from the
is
great Commonwealth of
incitement.
Pennsylvania.
God, what a
I mean,
stupid
that
question.
video,
She's sitting here
just
talking
as a
about these
human
brilliant
being,
women, and she's so
was very hard
incompetent.
to watch. The chanting.
I don't even know who that is.
I think
Her name tag
calling for
her
Intifada, global revolution,
is
very,
mercifully
very
for her
disturbing.
sake. Hidden.
And I can imagine many people's reaction to that would be one of fear. So I believe at a minimum that
Her
is
last name
that
is
is
Nadell.
hateful speech.
I had the same thought right away.
That has been and should be condemned. Whether it rises to the level of incitement to violence under the policies that Penn and the city of Philadelphia follow, which are guided by the United States Constitution, I think is a much more difficult question. The incitement to violence is a very narrow category.
So let me just ask you there, if you became aware that a similar protest
Wild, that's her name.
or rally or whatever you call it, was going to be occurring on your campus tonight or tomorrow, how would you respond? What would your approach be?
Well, our approach with all rallies, vigils, and protests is that our public safety officers and something called open expression observers are present at all of them. We have a longstanding open expression policy that makes sure our open expression policies are followed. So I would make sure that those people were there. Our public safety officers usually try to speak to the organizers of the conference and talk to them about what our rules are about protests. I'm sorry, I think I said conference, about protests.
Can I just stop you? Because
Yes,
as you know, these are really short hearings. Were any actions taken to shut down the protest? I think it was Sunday night, Saturday night, whichever night it was.
The Philadelphia police, their what's called their civil action division was the lead on this. And no, I think they were there to make sure there was no incitement to violence.
But she's
no
a
violence.
Democrat.
I don't think any actions were taken.
Would you agree that your, in this case, Jewish students undoubtedly felt very uncomfortable following that?
I'm sure that's true, yes.
And I'm sure you've heard
I'm
from
sure
many
they
of them and
did.
their parents as
And,
well.
and
Yes.
I'm sure it almost certainly
And
was
there were acts
free
associated with
speech.
that protest which were
And that's why
defacing
the
some
entire
buildings, which
direction
clearly
of
would
this
unquestionably
hearing is
be
so
criminal action,
messed
and the
up.
police are
Because
trying
the
to determine
focus
who
should
did that.
be on what the
Thank
schools
you.
are teaching these
Unfortunately, as
kids,
usual, my
not on the
time has
protests that are
expired, but,
manifesting as a result of what they're being taught.
Hope we can continue this conversation in another
You're talking to the people who are overseeing the curricula, and that's what you should be focusing on. That's what every one of these people who actually
wanna
cares about
ask, our
addressing the
members,
problem should be
to
fixating on.
very careful
Not what steps are you taking
about
to make
the
sure
words they
that this
use
flood
about
of
our
hatred that
colleagues.
these schools created gets kept in check.
don't
But why
want
is
to
it that you keep
engage
contributing to this flood of
in
hatred with the curricula you
personalities,
teach,
and so I'm
basically
gonna
claiming that
ask our
Israel is the
members
most racist
to
thing in the
hold
world,
themselves
which is
to
the
a
biggest
higher
BS in
standard.
the world? Why is it that your schools
I
of
now
learning are
recognize Mr.
indoctrination
Banks.
centers? That's what you should be
Ms.
focusing
McGill,
on.
just weeks before the October 7 terror attacks against Israel, Penn hosted a Palestine Rights Literature Festival.
The event featured Mark Lamont Hill, who was fired by CNN for calling for the destruction of Israel. It also hosted and included a member of the Palestinian Youth Movement, which has collaborated with anti-Israel terrorists, and maybe most notably, Roger Waters, the really wacky former Pink Floyd vocalist. The same Roger Waters, by the way, who's publicly used anti-Jewish slurs, desecrated the memory of Anne Frank, and has dressed up as a Nazi and floated a pig balloon with the Star of David at many of his concerts. Why in the world would you host someone like that on your college campus to speak at the so-called Palestinian Rights Literature Festival?
That's a good
I
question.
appreciate the opportunity to discuss this. Anti-Semitism has no place at Penn.
Why did you invite Roger Waters? What did you think you would get out of him?
Anti-Semitism has no place at Penn, and our free speech policies are guided by the United States Constitution.
Why did you invite Roger Waters? And do you,
Anti-Semitism does not
Yeah,
have a place
I
at
got no
Penn,
answer.
and
I got
what
no
Roger
answer.
Waters stands for?
Why? We'll bring
Congressman,
in Louis
prior
Farrakhan
to
next.
the event, I issued a statement calling out the anti-Semitism of some of the speakers at that
that's very
conference.
helpful.
Specifically Roger Waters. Yes or no?
Roger Waters was among
Simple.
them.
So
Yes.
you specifically called out a guy who floated pig balloons with the Star of David at his concerts.
I called out
I
the
haven't seen the condemnation. I'm going to go look for it after this hearing. And I hope I can find that well-recorded condemnation from you.
I did call out the anti-Semitism of some of the speakers at a conference
But
that
not-
had more than
not
100 people.
In the aftermath of the
Because
Palestinian
so many of them
Rights
hated Jews.
Festival, you and your board chairman wrote a memo outlining Penn's
Imagine
free
would
speech
they
policies.
brought in David
You
Duke?
said, quote,
Would you allow David
Penn
Duke
does
in
not
there?
regulate the content of speech or symbolic behavior. You wrote, including speech, quote, incompatible with the school's values. You went on to say that Penn does not have a policy
Because
against hate speech
the elites
because, quote,
hate
defining and policing
minorities.
robust debate, even with respect to the most disturbing issues, is unwise. That's what you wrote. But in 2013, Penn canceled now Prime Minister Modi's scheduled keynote address at a Wharton-hosted economic forum in the face of opposition from Indian American professors. And for the past year, your administration has sought to punish Amy Wax, a tenured law professor, for her stance on DEI and identity issues. And then you canceled an event with former ICE director Tom Holman due to disruptive student protest simply because he worked for former President Donald Trump.
Yeah. So him you won't hear from.
Ms. McGill, the fact is that Penn regulates speech that it doesn't like. Everyone gets this.
Dang.
No one more than
This
the
guy dropping
faculty
fire.
and students who know exactly where the lines are that they're okay to cross.
Uh-huh.
Why did Penn let Professor Ahmad Amala off the hook, who led hundreds of students in chanting, "There's only one solution, Intifada revolution"? Why does that professor still have a job at your university?
Representative, our approach to speech is, as I identified, it follows and is guided by the United States Constitution, which allows for robust perspectives. I disagree with the characterization that
It's what
we
your
treat
curricula
speech differently,
incorporates.
and
learn
I
to hate
can't discuss
Jews.
any individual disciplinary
The
proceeding.
same goes for Penn professor Ann Norton, who's repeatedly denied Hamas's worst atrocities on October 7. Or how about Huda Fakhreddin, who romanticized the murder of over 1,000 Israeli Jews as, quote, Palestine inventing a new way of life, and clapped as a speaker said Jews should go back to Berlin and Moscow? Why does that professor still have a job at your university?
Good question.
I'm very troubled by what you're describing, Congressman, that kind of
You're
that's-
speaking out of both sides of your mouth. You're defending it. You allow these professors to teach at your college. You create a safe haven for this type of anti-Semitic behavior. You said something earlier about anti-Semitism being symbolic of the larger society. Your university is a hotbed of it. And one of the reasons that we're seeing a rise of anti-Semitism and an unsafe environment for Jewish college students all over this country. You're largely
No,
responsible
for Jewish people all over this
Madam
this
Chair.
country is because of these colleges.
Thank you, Mr. Norcross.
That's
You're
what it is.
recognized for
It's
5
for Jewish
minutes.
people all over. Is that these colleges are teaching them to hate Jews? That's what's happening. It's reality.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and certainly for holding this hearing on an incredibly important subject that has been thrust upon us, or should I say, has been
Thanks was
rethrust.
great.
This is an issue that has been before our country and our world for quite some time. But the one thing I do want to state before I go into my questioning is the idea of making this a partisan issue is disgusting. This issue has nothing to do with being on a red or a blue team. This is an American issue.
No,
in
it's
terms
actually
of what
it's
we're
actually
facing on
far
our
worse if
campuses
you're on the blue
and
team.
shouldn't be
It's a far bigger
taken
problem from the
under the
blue
light
team,
of a
as is being
partisan
made
issue.
evident here.
That being
90%
given,
of these
I
schools'
do have
body
some questions,
faculty are from the left,
particularly
and that's where we have the worst
for
forms
the
of
University of
anti-Semitism ever seen
Pennsylvania
in this
and its
country.
president, who is within a
The
couple thousand
loudest
yards of my
screaming of Jew
district.
hatred
And
has
we'll
come from these
start
colleges.
with back during August, Penn announced plans to host the Palestinian Rights Festival that was going to be held in September. And given that the ADL identified many of the speakers, I believe the number was 25, as anti-Semitic, this continued to happen. The idea of what happened during that event, after the event, and as much as last night, as I was traveling down here to see what is still happening in and around the campus, is extremely disturbing given the atrocities that have happened in the Middle East. So, Dr. McGill, did you have the power to stop this event?
That's not the issue. See, this is where they keep coming to. It's the,
Under our approach to
not the events.
academic freedom and free expression, Congressman, we have probably thousands of speakers to campus every single year. Many of them I
Diversity in
disagree
that.
with.
No two clones.
I don't cancel or
present.
censor them in advance of their arrival to campus.
So
What
anytime
about Tom Homan? You censored him.
you use the word censor, so any event on your campus, you would never interfere for the fear of censoring somebody. Is that what you're suggesting?
Not sure what you mean, Matthew.
Well, Congressman, we are, of course, always concerned about safety and security, so that could be a constraint we would be worrying about in thinking about an event. It's a very rare
So there would be
occasion.
times that you would stop an event under the terms of censoring if you, under your opinion or those advising you, say there would be a security issue.
Well, our approach is not to censor based on the content, but to worry about things like the safety and security and the time, place, and manner in which the event would occur.
So, given what happened in October, you could not see ahead that was going to happen, but the idea that groups coming on that are clearly identified as anti-Semitic would be of a concern.
I was concerned about the anti-Semitism of some of the speakers at that conference, and also the timing of that conference was particularly painful because it occurred during the holiest time of the Jewish year. And that's why, in advance of the conference, while saying that we are committed to academic freedom and free expression and the conference would go on, I specifically condemned the anti-Semitism of some of the speakers.
Condemning.
Oh,
You
because
would
it happened during a
have
holy
to
time.
stop it if, in your opinion, there was a security issue.
Well, Congressman, whether there is a security issue is something that I leave to our public safety individuals, and I defer to their judgments on those matters.
Did you ask them?
We discussed the security and safety of every large conference that happens on our campus, and yes, we did talk about this one.
And they, in their opinion, along with you, decided that there were no security issues by the nature of you would allow this to continue.
We did not believe, we believed we were ready for any security concerns that might arise. So yes, it went ahead.
In hindsight, do you think that was a proper decision?
I think canceling that conference would have been very inconsistent with academic freedom and free expression, despite the fact that the views of some of the people who came to that conference I find very, very objectionable because of their anti-Semitism.
Would you permit your academic department to sponsor a conference if 25 speakers that the NAACP would identify as racist?
Congressman, we follow our policies always, and our policies are guided by the United States Constitution and a commitment to academic freedom and free expression.
So is that a yes or no answer?
The answer is that we follow our policies.
I'll yield back.
Mr. Owens, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Let me just start off by saying, being raised in the 60s, days of segregation.
I just need to drop this for John Roberts over here. It's for you, brother. Thank you, John.
Through my growth of over the years, is that hate is not passed down our genes. It's taught or untaught. What we're seeing here is hate being perpetuated. We keep people segregated. Keep them from building bridges of trust, never allowing them to find commonality.
Oh, that's what you mean.
Teach them that everything that's going wrong in their life is because of somebody else's actions.
No, tenure would trump at will.
Our color, creed, and culture. And then teach them to judge each other.
Dehumanizing. Tenure trumps being an at-will employee.
But the end game, if it is
becomes part of their contract that they're tenured.
We teach one race, all minorities, that they are oppressed. Through DEI, we then teach another race, whites and Jews, that they're oppressors. The result is hatred, segregation, the inability for our children to see evil when it's present. One of my Democratic colleagues was asked recently about the use of strategy by Hamas to rape Jewish women and children, girls and women, as terror. Her response was not to defend these women against these evil men, but that she wanted to discuss hierarchical oppression.
Hierarchical.
That is DEI. It's a failure to protect Jewish communities across our country at your universities. Let me just say this also.
It's not about protecting them.
Was a very different day.
Crying out loud, I'm so tired of this. It's the messaging that's teaching them to hate.
Anti-Semitism. Some kind of way drift off into every other sense of racism.
They're not getting to the source of the problem. None of them are.
1,200 lives, babies being burned, beheaded, hostages, and yet we cannot stay focused on anti-Semitism. I just remember a couple of years ago when we were dealing with Black Lives Matter, try to talk about Blue Lives Matter, Jew Lives Matter, Arab Lives Matter, and you'd be called a racist. It's time for us to focus on what's happening on your campuses. And it might sound flowery, all the ideas of what your values might be, but those values not being translated to our kids. You've seen them in the streets every single day.
Oh, the values they care about are being translated, and that's what we're seeing.
A university student
that's
here,
the problem.
DEI official liked on the most posts on their media, a post calling President Biden a liar for saying that Hamas have beheaded babies. She also posted saying that Israel doesn't have the right to exist.
What? C-SPAN. C-SPAN. What you doing, C-SPAN? What you doing to me, C-SPAN? I like this guy. C-SPAN.
Other, as opposed to dividing us based on color, creed, and all the other things. And by the way, is it okay for a white group to say we don't want other minorities to be part of our graduation?
Thank you for the question. There are few scenes that are more inspiring than being.
I'm sorry. I don't,
Are you going to answer the question or start going your own stupid
soapbox
soapbox speech?
Is it okay to segregate people based on their color? Yes or no?
I oppose segregation.
Okay, well, I do too, but it's happening on your campus, okay? Dr. Cornbooth, I'm sorry. We have on your campus something called Chocolate City, where black only dorms, where whites are excluded.
Chocolate City?
Is it okay also for whites to set up a white-only dorm where minorities are excluded?
You know, actually at MIT, our students affiliate voluntarily with whichever dorm they want to. It's not exclusionary, it's actually positive selection by students which dormitory they want to
Positive
live in.
selection.
Okay, so it's okay
Positive selection of
for
whites. That would be
blacks to
okay.
not make whites feel included. Is it okay for whites not to let blacks feel included on your campus? We're talking about segregation,
You
and
know,
it's obviously happening on your campuses.
You know, I think it's really important to say that there's a distinction between sending an exclusionary message and looking to other students for common experiences and support.
Okay. Let me just, I'm sorry, I'm running out of time. And what you're saying is very simply.
Look
in
at the world we're
1960s,
living
it
in
would've been okay
in
for whites
2023.
and blacks
You
to
have a
segregate themselves so they
black
felt more
member
like
of the
people to live
House
with. I
making
disagree
a
very, very
white
much. But let me just say
member,
this:
a white
if in case
leader of
we
a
discover,
school
and this is for everybody here,
defend the
real quick,
fact
last few minutes,
that they're
that
allowing
there's a
reverse
direct link
racism
of
of blacks
DEI
versus
and
whites.
CRT to the
This is
growth
just
of Marxist-centrist groups
astonishing.
like BLM, Antifa, and the pro-Hamas on campuses, would you then end the DEI initiatives on your campus? If there's a link between what that is and what the result of hatred, would that be would that be finished on your campus real quickly? We have just yes or no. Dr. Gates, let's start with you.
I like
yes
this
or
guy
no?
a lot.
Our DEI efforts are about ensuring that all of our
Okay, so that's a no.
members
Okay, the
welcome.
doctor, I'm sorry, Miss McGill. Yes or no? If it's found to be a link between Marxist, BLM, Antifa, and hate groups. Yes or no?
Our DEI office is committed to having everyone
Okay, so no.
thrive.
All right, and Miss Cornwall, real quick, just yes or no. Sorry.
I find it hard to understand how equity and inclusion as a
That's
concept
a no.
is a
Okay.
hatred inducer.
Thank you so much. I think that says a
You
lot. Thank you,
can,
bro. Appreciate it.
you can give an answer in writing, and I have to remind
He's
members
great.
not to engage in personalities. Ms. McBath, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member Scott, to our staff, and thank you so much to our witnesses today. And it is not lost on me that the intellect, the intelligence that we have on this panel today
Is limited.
The most intelligent
Exceedingly
minds that are
limited.
leading our highest institutions are women.
Yeah,
So thank you so
and they
very much.
suck.
I had the
So
privilege
much.
of attending a very similar hearing in the Higher Education Subcommittee just a few weeks ago, and I'm glad to see that we're continuing this conversation at a full committee level. Acts or expressions of anti-Semitism have no place in our society and
course.
definitely
Let's
not
give
on
lip
any
service to
college
that
campus
before
or
we veer into
institution
our own
here in the
issue.
United States. And what we must all understand is that this is not just the Jewish community's struggle. This is all of our struggle, and the Jewish community does not get to bear this burden alone. It is up to all of us to learn more and stand in solidarity against hate in our daily lives to ensure that the violence and the tragedies that follow unchecked, hatred will never be allowed to repeat themselves. I lost my son to that very hatred, so I understand it in my core. Similar to other expressions of racial and religious hatred, all freedom-loving people, all those who truly believe in the ideals that this country was founded on and continue to strive towards, must stand together in the face of this disturbing increase in hate across the country and across the world. An outpouring of support for the Jewish community and public condemnation of these heinous acts by interfaith and community leaders and elected officials in all backgrounds is the exact type of action that we need to take to confront this form of radical evil. Unity in the face of intimidation is how we are effectively going to resist hate in all of its forms. These actions seek to divide and intimidate us. We must show that we will not be intimidated, that we will not falter when our neighbors need us the most, that we are united against hate and we choose to love instead, regardless of our political ideologies or our ethnic differences.
It's nice that she stands on the
Dr.
coffin
King
of her
once
own
said,
kid
and I
as a
quote,
basis for her
returning
power.
hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. My community in metropolitan Atlanta is home to the largest community in the Deep South, the largest Jewish community in the Deep South. And it is no stranger to these incidents of anti-Semitism. I recall participating in a press conference with interfaith leaders, our local law enforcement, and elected officials, the Anti-Defamation League, and the Council General of Israel.
How
the
does she
Southeast
lose
to
to
condemn the
racism,
appearance
a
of
child to childbirth?
Anti-Semitic vandalism and white supremacist symbols that
I
were
don't look this woman up.
definitely expressed in our neighborhoods and our communities. While the reason for our gathering was very somber, it was uplifting to see so many
It says he lost to
different
gun
people from
violence.
so many different faiths and backgrounds all come together to make it clear
In June
that this is antithetical
20,
to what our community and our society
21,
stands for.
in May of 2021.
Dr. Nadell,
Right.
I've had you before me before, and it's good to see you again. Can you please discuss some of the schools or the communities that have built strong interracial and interreligious connections and relationships in the aftermath of a racist or anti-Semitic incident, and what building those connections looks like and why they're so critical and imperative to healing?
So first of all, thank you. It's wonderful to see you again. What really stands out is how at the personal level, change can happen.
It wasn't
So
a
for
childbirth.
example, at the
It was a different
University of
kid.
California at Berkeley, which is a campus that has been
She had a
roiled,
son who was
as these
7.
campuses have also been roiled, a professor of Israel studies and a faculty member from
His
Middle Eastern
17-year-old son who was
studies
killed in
sent
some
out
fight over
a
loud music.
joint letter pleading with the campus to speak in a civil tone. These are two faculty members who do not agree politically on what has been going on, but they got together to write this, and then it was sent out to the entire community. It is those kinds of actions that we need to be applauding, and we need to be elevating and uplifting, and as I said before, they just don't tend to make headlines.
Thank you so very much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. McBath.
It's weird
Mr.
how she
Goode,
has
you're
that whole
recognized for
puppet,
5 minutes.
that whole
Thank you,
dummy
Madam Chairman.
mouth.
Ms.
Like drawn
McGill,
on with the mouth
September
short drop.
21, a Penn student was taken into custody after bursting into a Jewish organization's morning prayer service, shouting anti-Semitic comments, destructing property, and so forth. On November 10, after the October 7 Hamas attack, Penn issues an apology for a display of light projected onto campus buildings with anti-Israeli messages, including phrases such as, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," and "Zionism is racism." On November 15, the Department of Ed announces that Penn is under investigation for possible civil rights violations of Title VI. And then just 2 days ago, another pro-Palestinian march happened on the edge of campus with Penn property being graffitied with offensive messages such as F the IDF, Intifada, the Arabic word for uprising, and so much and more. There is a deeply troubling tendency by many on the left, as has already been expressed in this hearing, in media, academia, among elected officials, and even some on this committee, who try to somehow conflate or equate anti-Semitism with so-called Islamophobia. It's troubling that it seems that it's only Jews or Israelis who, when they're attacked or victimized, somehow become the oppressors or instigators of those attacks in the eyes of leftists or some on Penn's campus specifically. It's wrong to suggest that anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are equivalent problems in this country,
This is
as
true.
noted already in this hearing. Jewish hate crime is
It's
the
so
most
hungover.
dominant hate crime in this country today. Ms. McGill specifically. Again, just this past Sunday night, there was another march on the edge of the UPenn campus, an anti-Israeli march. Has there, at any time since October 7, been an equivalent large-scale gathering of crowds in support of the slaughter of Muslims or the elimination of an Arab or predominantly Muslim state? Has that happened on your campus or anywhere near your campus that you're aware of since October 7?
Or ever.
Congressman, any act of hate, I find.
Has that ever happened? It's a yes or no question. Answer it.
In support of the slaughter of Muslims or the elimination of an Arab state on or near your campus that you're aware of since October 7?
Congressman, not that I'm aware of.
Okay,
There
thank
have
you.
been.
So you would agree then it would be immoral or dishonest to treat the two as equivalent problems on campus, meaning anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, that there's an equivalency there on the scale of the scope of the problem on campus. Would you agree that would be immoral or dishonest to equate the two?
Congressman, I abhor all acts of hate.
Would you agree that it's immoral or dishonest?
Why don't
to
you
equate
answer the
two, that
question,
problems are
you
equal on
slimy,
your
slithering
college campus
snake?
or other college campuses? Any evidence of that effect?
Congressman, I abhor all acts
Thank
of
you.
hate.
That's not an answer
Dr.
to the
Gay,
question.
On October 8, nearly 36 Harvard student groups authored a statement holding Israel responsible for the Hamas attack. On October 18, a Jewish Harvard Business School student was
guy
surrounded,
came
accosted,
prepared with
and shoved to the
facts.
ground while walking near and filming an anti-Israel protest. On November 10, when you condemned the use of the phrase "from river to the sea," over 100 faculty signed a letter criticizing your response to that, criticizing that phrase or condemning the use of that phrase. A Harvard Crimson survey of the class of 2022 showed that 93% of respondents viewed President Trump as unfavorable. 6% of students said they were conservative. 34% of students viewed favorably the Palestinian boycott, divestment, and sanctions, or BDS movement. Currently, Harvard is being investigated by the Department of Education for Title VI violations of civil rights. Title VI, as you know, prohibits recipients of federal funds from discriminating on the basis of race, color, or national origin. A Title VI violation would occur when an institution has allowed, permitted, or created a hostile environment that targets someone based on their race, color, or national origin. We know, of course, that Harvard has a history of dividing people based on race, based on the Supreme Court's decision in Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard. Does Harvard actually teach anti-Semitism in classes?
Yes. They call it anti-Zionism, but yes.
Thank you, Congressman, for the
No, we don't
question.
do that.
No, we do not.
No,
And we
no.
condemn anti-Semitism
Lies.
in Harvard.
It's a lie.
At Harvard, there is
You call
no
it
place for
anti-Zionism.
anti-Semitism.
As you know, Harvard received, over the last 4 years, $3.2 billion in
Change
federal
that one
grants
word.
and contracts. During the 2021 school year, Harvard received $104 million through Title IV. Why should Congress continue to invest money in Harvard when Harvard clearly violates Title VI and helps foster a hostile environment for Jewish students?
We are committed at Harvard to ensuring that all of our students thrive, that they feel safe and secure.
Well, apparently
And we're
100
grateful
professors,
for our-
100 professors who sent that letter to you criticizing your condemnation of anti-Semitic remarks don't agree with that. And your students, your institution is clearly producing students who are sympathetic to a terrorist organization. Don't you think that's a misuse of taxpayer dollars? My time has expired. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Good. Ms. Hayes, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. First, I would like to frame my comments in the basic idea that I condemn all forms of hate.
Here
I
we
don't
go.
think that there's any splitting hairs there.
You know,
That
somehow when
does not
people
make
said
me
all
radical
lives matter,
left.
that was
It makes
considered
me
racist.
human
But all
to
forms
think
of
that
hate,
all
that's not
people should
racist.
feel safe in their environment.
Shut up, Miss.
In the wake of the October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks in Israel, there's been a dramatic nationwide rise in reported anti-Semitic incidents, especially on college campuses. Anti-Semitism in this nation has been on the rise for at least a decade. The ADL found that the number of anti-Semitic
sucks.
incidents in the U.S. increased by more than 35%
That's
from 2021
stupidly
to
empty statistic.
2022, and we've seen those numbers skyrocket in the last 2 months. A few weeks ago at Central Connecticut State University in my district, a racial slur and a swastika were written on a bathroom stall on campus. We should all be working to find solutions to this problem, not doing what we're doing here today in this committee. The Biden administration released the national strategy to counter
administration is terrible.
anti-Semitism earlier this year.
Oh, yeah.
The strategy seeks to increase awareness and education in schools, communities, and the workplace about anti-Semitism.
Does nothing.
This includes having the United States Holocaust and Memorial Museum launch the first ever U.S.-based Holocaust Education Research Center
Complete
to
waste of
promote
money.
effective Holocaust education. As a history teacher, I know the immense power of storytelling and how healthy dialogue is imperative to finding common ground.
Yeah.
I would also like to
The
make the
dialogue
point
fostered in these
that
schools
teachers,
is everyone needs to hate on
professors,
Israel.
educators
And oh my God, how
do
does that
not enter
translate
this
into
profession
Jew
to
hatred?
hate any group of people. I'm happy to hear that all of the people on the panel list responded to the question by my colleague that you do not collect data on the conservative or liberal views of
Because
faculty.
that would be
I'd argue
humiliating
that
as to
that
how
would
much
be
Jew hatred there is.
unconstitutional.
No, it's not.
I would also like to
No, it's
note
not.
in the case of Harvard, you had a very conservative, notable alum who was invited to join your advisory committee. So diversity of thought is important.
No.
And all those views
I'm
should be
shaking my head
welcome
no
on
because
any
subconsciously I
college
recognize
campus.
that everything I'm saying is
President
complete
McGill,
BS.
What steps has the University of Pennsylvania taken in the history to ensure students have an understanding of the history of anti-Semitism in order to address the rise of hate on your college campus?
I appreciate the question very much. There are a wide variety of things we do at Penn. We are
Empty lip
very
service.
proud to be home to a very strong Jewish studies department with
Very
faculty
strong.
members who are expert, like Dr. Nadell, on the
That's
history
Nadell's an
and
idiot.
manifestation of
She's an airhead.
anti-Semitism. Many students are taking those classes. We are proud to call Penn home.
There would be
to the
less
Cat Center for
Jew
Judaic
hatred in the
Studies,
world if
which
Dr.
is a
Nadell
world
was
resource
a gardener.
in historical materials
Mowing my lawn
about,
outside right now.
Judaica
There'd
and
be less Jew hatred in the
anti-Semitism
world.
and
She
many
doesn't-
centuries of history, actually. And many of our faculty and staff and students
Hey, new
participate in
member.
programs at the Cat Center through
I
their
like
fellowships
that.
and
I
education.
like that, new
And
member.
the third thing I'd
Welcome to
identify, and
following.
there's more to say, are we have many student groups that engage with one another across lines of
I'll give you one of these.
disagreement.
That's a little welcome.
And they talk together, usually with the
You
leadership of faculty,
taking
to
lemonade
learn from one
lemonades.
another and from the faculty.
That's stupid.
Which is
empty
exactly what
conversation.
is supposed to happen on a college campus.
Exactly.
I
what's
also
supposed
want to
happen
acknowledge the
on
increase in
campus.
Islamophobia
There we
after
go.
the October 7th attack.
Shut up.
Not
Yeah.
so-called Islamophobia,
No,
but
so-called.
Islamophobia.
No, so-called.
Palestinian students on and off college campuses have been targeted.
Really? Examples.
President Gay, in your November 9th open letter to members of the Harvard community, you mentioned specific steps that you are implementing in
Examples of
connection
that
with your
happening.
ongoing work with the Anti-Semitism Advisory Group. Specifically, you mentioned work being conducted at the Office of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging. I'll also just say that 18,000 complaints have been received by the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, the same office that my colleagues are trying to defund. 48% of those have been sex discrimination, 32% disability discrimination, and 17% based on race or national origin. We have a problem. We need to welcome
You're the
and
problem.
embrace diversity in this country and teach young people why it is important to have a full understanding. My time has expired and I know I'm going to be gavelled out. So if you can just submit that question for the record, I would appreciate it. And thank you all for the work that you are doing.
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
We
Hayes.
still have all lives for 5 minutes.
Ms. Steele, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Fox, for leading this important hearing. In October, I introduced H.R. 5933, the Deterrent Act, to bring greater transparency and accountability for institutions of higher education accepting donations from foreign entities. This bill will pass House hopefully tomorrow, and I'm hoping that Senate will take it up. The involvement of hostile foreign entities in our post-secondary institutions is one of the biggest threats facing colleges and
Oh,
universities.
she's nailing it.
Question number one is Dr. Kornblatt. In September 2019, then Secretary DeVos opened the Section 117. It's a foreign disclosure section.
Yes.
Investigation into
She's
MIT
getting it.
that has not been closed.
This is the text of
What
her bill.
concrete steps that has MIT taken to address the lack of Section 117 report?
They are being paid
So let me
by the
say, and
Arab
thank you for the
states
question.
to
We've
promote
cooperated
anti-Israel
fully.
rhetoric.
I can't comment on an open
They get
investigation,
grants
but I have to
and
say we
millions
have
and millions of
greatly
dollars
increased our
from
reporting to be
from
fully
OPEC and all these
compliant.
different big oil
So it's not
countries like
that-
Iran,
done
the Middle
yet, but
East,
we-
to
it's
promote
still under
anti-Israel
investigation,
rhetoric,
as I
and that's
understand
why
it.
this is happening. This congresswoman gets it.
A study released just last month by the Institute for the Global Study of Anti-Semitism found that from 2015 to 2020, institutions that accepted unreported money from Middle Eastern donors had on average 300 more anti-Semitic incidents than those institutions that
Told you.
did not. President Gay, McGill, and Kornblatt, any of you can answer this. Do you believe foreign nations with views hostile to Israel would desire U.S. students to echo their views?
Yes or no?
I think
Dr. Gay can
I
start.
disagree with
Thank you
those
for the
views.
question. So we have alumni all over the world.
That's not answering the
And
question.
those alumni, through their philanthropy, support student aid, scholarships,
No,
cutting-edge
it's
research.
actually countries that are donating.
One thing that their philanthropy does not do is influence how we run the university,
Lie.
how we enforce
Lie,
our policies,
lie.
or how we keep our students
It's not
safe.
the philanthropy. It's these countries who are giving grants. You're full of
Okay.
crap. You're a big, fat, stinking liar.
Thank you for the question. At Penn, we of course follow every law and regulation about donations from individuals in other countries. Beyond that, we do not accept any gift that would compromise our mission or create any sort of
No,
conflict
you just
of
changed what
interest.
your mission is.
So we have a very elaborate vetting process.
Full of crap.
And we have declined gifts where we have a worry that would be inconsistent with our mission. And
Sure.
we're very clear.
And you
about
just
this.
voluntarily teach your students
Yes,
to
thank
hate
you. So
Israel.
all funds that come to MIT in any form
Not 'cause
are
you're
for
bribed,
open,
right?
publishable research. We retain full control over what research is conducted. We also have an extensive internal review process for reviewing foreign gifts. We also adhere to all federal laws, and we see these reviews through the lens of national security, economic security, and importantly, human rights.
Thank you for your answers, and I hope that's really true.
But I know it's
President
not.
McGill, that from 2014 through 2019, Penn received a total of almost $300 million in Section 117 funding. Are you aware of the amount that was given by Qatar? Were any of these donations conditioned on the inclusion
Oh,
of
she's
a
going for it. She's going
pro-Palestinian
right for the money.
curriculum or pro-Palestinian events? Are you aware if any of these donations were
We totally turned down
conditioned
$300 million.
only for pro-Palestinian professors?
I appreciate the question. I want to repeat that we follow all laws and we accept nothing that is inconsistent with our mission.
Your mission
of
is to
teaching,
teach them
research,
to
and
hate
service.
Israel.
And we would never accept conditions on
Never.
gifts. My understanding
Never.
is we have taken no government gifts from the government of Qatar. We have a small number of alumni in Qatar who have given some gifts for annual gifts to schools. Very small number.
$300
But
million.
almost $300 million.
That's some.
Congressman, that figure as of funds from Qatar is not one I'm familiar with. That's not what my
Do you know
information tells
exactly
me.
how much you received from Qatar
278 million.
in Section 117 funding?
The data I have, yes, I am aware of our 117 filings. Maybe I can follow up with you afterwards. That's not consistent with what I understand our 117
What do you
filings
think
show,
your
which is
117
no gifts from the government of Qatar, and a very small number of annual gifts from alumni living in that country.
Well, it shouldn't be that hard to clear up.
Fox, thank you very much, and I yield back.
We'll look forward to a follow-up.
That was helpful.
Ms.
That
Stevens,
is
you're
a good
recognized for
thing
5 minutes.
to come out of this.
It is absolutely essential that the Committee on Education and Workforce have a hearing about rising anti-Semitism in the United States of America and what is unfolding on our college campuses. In particular, as many of us have the "Where were you" moment on 9/11, I have the "Where were you" on 10/7 moment. When I woke up to the news of the horrific and barbaric attack on Israel and what we learned that unfolded that day in horror, my thoughts went to our college campuses and what would happen on our college campuses, particularly as Jewish students have felt persecuted and attacked, and their families have been concerned for a multitude of years. And I want to say that it is incumbent on us
I don't know.
to let
I don't know who Ms. Stevens
Jewish
is.
students know that they are supported and that they
There's
belong.
something really off
And
here.
we know
Something's
that
very
the
off.
role of university presidents encompasses a lot of things. And in my home state of Michigan, and in my home district at Oakland University, our university president, Ora Peskovitz, wrote a very compelling op-ed, and she said, one of my roles is to decipher and distinguish between protecting free speech and tackling unlawful harassment. And I was wondering if our university presidents could chime in on how you balance that and do that distinguishing and also that enforcing to make sure that we do not have unlawful harassment or the incitement of violence on our college campuses. Would you like to start, Dr. Colbert?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, so thank you for raising that. You know, college campuses are a crucible of ideas where students are side by side, and it's part of the education to hear things that they feel are uncomfortable.
That's what it was.
To be absolutely
That's what it
clear,
was.
Speech can become a form of harassment, and our policies make absolutely clear that harassment is punishable. Speech that targets individuals, or again, as we've heard, incites violence on our campus, or crosses the line, these cross the line into harassment. This is taken very, very seriously.
And we obviously know that you're subject to the Clery Act and adhere to its rules and clauses. And
Clauses. Those rules and clauses.
now data from the ABA
This is like,
that says that
the voice sounds like a
2007
trans Jimmy Stewart.
a 388% increase
Ah,
in
so you're actually
anti-Semitism.
100% anti-Semitism.
We have to, one, call out anti-Semitism, but two, make sure that we have the right anti-hate laws in place. And it's important for us as a Congress to be partnering with all stakeholder groups. But something else along these lines, and maybe I'm sharing this as a fellow student of the humanities. I hold a master's in philosophy. And so a lot of times it's what's the question, not necessarily what is the answer. And by
Your
the way,
questions so far have
I
sucked.
hail from American University. 2 people graduated from my class in 06. So we need to have the proper place to exchange ideas and have the space to ask tough questions. What happens when we remove humanities? What happens when we allow for government to dictate what's being taught on our college campuses, similar to what we're seeing in Florida and in West Virginia? What risk does that pose, particularly
We risk
when
losing
we talk
the
about
precious.
the proper teaching of history?
May I take that? Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Coming from a majority STEM institution, as I said, I can't even think of a place where it's more important that our students also learn humanities, have a humanistic perspective. We all have to live and work together as people. And in order for us to be successful, when I think about the technologies that are coming down the road, we want our students to understand the moral implications.
We need to do both.
We need to do both.
We need
Exactly.
to do both. And we will continue to call out anti-Semitism as members of Congress and push on this topic. 5 minutes is certainly not enough. And I call on our committee chair. Let's have a hearing about affirmative action and what the Supreme Court ruling has now done to minority students and minorities being able to join institutions of higher
Let's twist this
education.
over.
Let's have a hearing
Oh, yeah,
about
of course. It's very,
Islamophobia.
very relevant.
Let's talk about anti-LGBTQ
Oh, for
practices
Christ,
that are
shut up,
affecting
you
the mental health
idiot.
of students
Shut
on
up,
college
you
campuses.
rambling
and I yield
Keebler,
back.
Elf, Smeagol, John, Jimmy
The representative
Stewart.
from
What
Michigan,
the hell
Mrs.
is wrong
McLean,
with
is
you, stupid?
recognized.
Also,
Thank you. Thank you all for being here
turn
today.
this
I
into
listened
something
to
just
your opening
way
statement,
over
and we
here.
all talked so passionately about what was happening on the college campuses as it pertains to anti-Semitism is absolutely unacceptable. And I appreciate that. However, talk is cheap, and we really need action. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about today is what actual action items, not lip service, but action items have happened. So I'll start with you, President Gay. Under your leadership, Harvard has done little to condemn Hamas's brutal murder of women and children, promote Israel's right to defend itself, or protect Jewish students from harassment. For example, I'm curious, what action was taken from Harvard when a Jewish student was mobbed on your campus last month? Action, not lip service action, ma'am.
So this specific incident, I've communicated about publicly. So as you may know, that is an incident that is currently under investigation by HUPD and the
Yeah,
FBI.
any action.
And when that
Looking for the action.
investigation is complete,
So you
we
can't
will
answer.
address
I'm
it
going to
through
move
a
on to my
student
next
disciplinary
question. Do you
process.
have an action item or not as of this time? Was any action taken? Any action?
I can't share
thank you.
more about.
Why not?
Will
Why
these
can't you?
students intimidating Jewish students just because they are Jewish be expelled from the university?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your question.
Will the students who are intimidating Jewish students just because they're Jewish be expelled?
You're describing conduct that sounds like it would violate our policies against bullying and intimidation and harassment. And if that is the
So a
case, it
simple
would be
answer, yes.
addressed
Thank you.
through our policies.
Another question, why did you allow protesters to occupy University Hall for 24 hours? And not only were these students not punished, but two of your deans provided them with food and promised no disciplinary action would be taken. And that was reported by the Harvard Crimson.
I can assure you that we have very strong disciplinary processes.
Yeah,
And where conduct violates
What the
our
hell's that
policies,
mean?
We
So did
use
you
those
hours.
violate your policies
We
during
have
that
disciplinary
incident?
processes
stinking deans.
underway.
So is there an answer to that or not?
We have disciplinary processes underway.
So was any discipline action? I love the lip service. I do. And you academic,
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I'm looking for an action item. Yes, no. Was anybody expelled? Any action item? And if you
We
don't know,
ho-
that's okay too.
We hold our community to
All right,
account
I'll
for our
reclaim my
policies.
time. Thank you, President McGill. Under your tenure, swastikas have been drawn outside residence halls where Jewish students live. The Hillel House was broken into. Jewish students urged not to wear symbols of their ethnicity, and those same students harassed when they go to collect Kala for Shabbat. I will be submitting questions for the record on outbreaks of anti-Semitism at UPenn. And I look forward to your response because obviously 5 minutes is just way too short of an answer. But I would encourage you to give answers. We deserve answers. People deserve answers, not rhetoric,
I'll turn my
action
mic off.
items. It is clear that the Jewish students on all of your campuses are afraid to be themselves because you have refused to take real action. There's that word, action, against anti-Semitism, right? A lot of rhetoric, no action. I strongly encourage all of you to look at the Holocaust learning experience set up by Morris Life Health System in Florida to teach lessons from the actual Holocaust to students in 5th through 12th grade. This program has trained hundreds of
pronounced
teachers
hollow.
in 2 short years and has gone a long way to teaching students about the harm anti-Semitism has in our communities. Harvard, UPenn, and MIT, I think y'all could learn a little bit about this. With the remainder of my time, I will yield to Ms. Stefanik.
Harvard receives funding from foreign entities and governments which support its Middle East Studies Department, correct?
We receive funding from a variety of sources because we have alumni from
That's
all over
what
the
they use it
world.
for.
But that is correct, right? The Middle Eastern Studies Department?
We receive funding from
It's a
various
yes
sources.
or no. Are you not aware where the Middle Eastern Studies Department receives funding?
We receive funding from
I
various
am asking
sources.
you a yes or no question. You are under oath in front of the United States Congress. You are giving lip service provided your attorneys. It's a yes or no question. Harvard receives funding from foreign entities and governments which support its Middle Eastern Studies Department, correct?
We have alumni all over the world, and we benefit
So the
from
answer is
their
correct.
from their
Yes?
philanthropy.
Yes? The answer is correct?
We receive support
And
from our
that's-
alumni from all over the
And that
world,
support,
from individuals.
and what amount of support is that reported to the federal government?
I'd have to actually look at our filings.
You don't know? As the president of the university, you don't know?
Not that particular number.
It's
No, I don't.
$1.5 billion over the past 3 years. Are you aware of that?
$1.5 billion
I don't know if that
to
is the
teach
correct
our kids
number, but that's
to
the number
hate
you shared.
Israel.
Has Harvard
That's what's happening.
reported all
Regular
of the
order.
federal, oh, my time.
That's what's happening. $1.5 billion teaching their kids
Ms.
to
Manning, you're
teach Harvard
recognized
kids
for
to
5
hate
minutes.
Israel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For years, virulent anti-Semitism
500
has
million
been
a
on the
year,
rise
just to
on
Harvard.
college campuses. And sadly, since October 7th, the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack, campus anti-Semitism has skyrocketed.
That's
on your
why it's all lip
campuses and
service.
all across the country. It is shocking, it is pervasive, it is threatening, and it is stunningly visible. The fear Jewish students are facing is real and it's justified. Jewish students are trying to get an education while entrance to their classes are blocked by protests outside and inside classroom buildings. They sit in classes disrupted by protesters with bullhorns accusing Israel of genocide, with students chanting, "Long live the Intifada." And by the way, as we all know, the Intifadas in Israel included years of terrorist bus bombings and restaurant bombings that resulted in countless deaths of Jewish and Arab civilians. Jewish students in college dining rooms are confronted with banners that say, "From the river to the sea," a phrase that calls for the end to the Jewish state and the killing of Jews. Don't take my word for it. You can listen to the leader of Hamas, who has been quite vocal about what that phrase means. A Jewish student at Harvard was asked by the professor to leave his class because the other students weren't comfortable
Thanks, Lynn.
having their discussion in front of that Jewish Israeli student. Jewish students have been pushed, spat upon, punched, and told not to leave their dorms for their own safety during protests. A Jewish student in my home state was told to rewrite a paper he wrote that supported an Israeli view of the conflict, or he risked failing the course. And Jewish
There you go.
students had their class
$1.5
interrupted
billion.
when a professor told the students that they were going to take a break so that all the students could go with him to attend the anti-Israel protest on campus.
There you go.
This intimidation, humiliation, and
There you go.
exclusion of Jewish students is simply unacceptable. It would not be tolerated against any other minority group, and
She
we
looks like a
need
monkey,
university
but she's
presidents
making-
to do
she's
more to
making great
protect
points.
Jewish students. President Gray, you and I have talked about anti-Semitism. You have told me your goal is to eradicate anti-Semitism at Harvard. That is a lofty goal, but will you commit to doing everything necessary to keep Jewish students and faculty safe and be able to participate in the full
Stop it.
range of
Stop it.
Harvard's
Keep them
learning
safe.
experiences?
Like there's zoo, like they're
The
like
short
they're-
answer is yes.
Thank you.
We're gonna keep
And
them
will
safe
you
in the zoo.
enforce all the codes of conduct against students and faculty who violate those codes? And will you communicate those codes
Oh my
and your
God.
intention to hold
Your lip
students
service.
and faculty
It's such a great start for
accountable?
3 minutes, and then you became like lip
Will you
service.
endeavor to
Idiots.
recenter the conversation
you
about the
idiots.
Middle East back to a place of fact-based exchange and evaluate your course offerings and your faculty to ensure that you have intellectual diversity and multiple perspectives about
Am I
Israel
wrong in
and
saying she looks
Zionism,
like Dr.
including
Zayas?
professors who support the right of Israel to exist and support the right of Jewish people to self-determination in the Middle East Studies Department?
Absolutely committed.
Thank you. And will you commit to work with Jewish and Israeli scholars to make sure Harvard has full range of lectures and scholarship described in Dr. Nadel's testimony?
Education is the path forward here.
So I understand that
I
you
can
have
say it about a white
condemned the
person.
phrase "from the river to the sea," but I also know that the Harvard School of Public Health has a course called "The Settler Colonial Determinants of Health" that introduces students to the concept of settler colonialism and its health equity implication. It uses case studies in the United States and Palestine and talks about poor health outcomes for indigenous and other non-settler communities.
Oh, this is a good call,
President
too.
Gray, are you aware that Jews were indeed indigenous to the land of Israel and have lived there for 2,000 years?
She thinks her name is Gray.
I do know about
Her
the
name
long
is Gay,
history.
and she like
in
can't
Israel.
say
So
gay.
what is Harvard doing to educate members of the community about these phrases and other
We're
false
taking 1.5
accusations
billion
that
from the Middle
Israel
East.
is a racist,
That's what we're
settler,
doing.
colonialist, apartheid state, given that Harvard is actually teaching courses with the underlying premise that Israel is a settler colonial state?
We have faculty, we have outside speakers who come and over the last couple of months in particular have been providing more insight into the
And we have
nature of the conflict
professors who
and
lead
the ways
marches
forward.
and
And obviously,
anti-Israel.
we have more work to do, and that's part of how we're going to eradicate anti-Semitism on our
Yeah.
campus.
Sadly,
gotta
my
give more
time is
lip
expiring,
service.
but I'd like to follow up on that and other courses at Harvard. And I'd also like to follow up with Ms. McGill about how her students felt, her Jewish students felt after the Palestinian
Shut up, you
writers
stupid empty lip
meeting,
service.
and whether they in fact felt
Thank you,
threatened and
Ms.
intimidated.
Manning.
Thank
Ms.
you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Miller, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Dr. Gay, when Harvard allows foreign students to enter the U.S. on a student visa, you are responsible for ensuring that they uphold our American values of free speech and free exercise of religion. Harvard can expel students who are here on a visa if they commit acts of violence or threaten violence against American citizens, which would terminate their student
That's not bad.
visas. Dr. Gay, has Harvard expelled any foreign students who are here on student visas for threatening violence against American students?
Our international students are an enormous source of pride for Harvard and part of our strength as an institution. And we hold
Absolutely.
those
I just want
students
to know if
accountable.
have you expelled anybody?
We hold those students accountable to the same set of disciplinary processes that we hold all of our students accountable
Absolutely.
So you have not expelled anybody? I'm assuming your non-answer is an answer to the students. They now know you have not expelled any foreign student for threatening the Jewish students. Dr. Gay, if Harvard found out that a student organization was taking money from or coordinating with a foreign terrorist organization, would you immediately suspend that student organization?
So our student organizations are recognized on the condition that they comply with Harvard policies. When they violate those policies, there are repercussions.
Harvard policies
Thank
are
you,
listing
Dr.
$500
or Ms.
million
McGill.
a year
Today you
for foreign
said
agents.
that you defend free speech at UPenn and follow the U.S. Constitution to determine your speech guidelines. Would you allow President Trump, who is a graduate of UPenn, to speak at UPenn if a student group invited him?
Yes.
Oh, that's excellent. I'm sure President Trump will be happy to hear that you would welcome him on the UPenn campus. Ms.
Yeah,
McGill, earlier
it's a
this
swing
year,
state.
a former
You might go
UPenn
there.
student told the House Judiciary Committee that she was forced to undress and change next to a grown man with male genitalia 18 times a week in the locker room. Ms. McGill, do you think it's appropriate for UPenn to force young women to change in a locker room with biological men against their will?
There's
I appreciate the question. At Penn, we follow the rules of competition, and if a student complies with the NCAA rules, they can compete for Penn.
Yes, this is a clear violation of Title IX. You are violating the civil rights of your female students, and you will be held to account for it. Ms. McGill, as president of UPenn, can you give us some insight into why Joe Biden was paid almost $1 million by UPenn? What were his responsibilities when he is at UPenn? Did he teach a class?
He was paid $1 million.
I appreciate the question. President Biden was a professor of practice at University of Pennsylvania for a little over 2 years. My understanding is that his salary was $400,000 a year. We also had Mr. Jeb
For doing
Bush as a
what?
professor of practice at University of Pennsylvania.
Because we're unicocks.
President Biden had a wide variety of obligations. He was in
What
many different
obligations
classes.
exactly did he have?
He held seminars, he was in many different classes, he interacted with thousands of students over the time he was there. He invited speakers. The goal of the center was to enhance.
For $400,000, anonymous Chinese donations poured into UPenn after your university hired Joe Biden, and he appeared to have a no-show job. The House Oversight Committee is going to get to the bottom of this, and I yield the remainder of my time to Dr. Fox.
Thank you very much. President McGill, on Sunday, I received a letter from the Wharton Club
There's
of
Jamal
Israel
Bowman over there.
outlining their efforts to secure a briefing for
runs out of
you
questions, he's
and
gonna
other
pull a fire
leaders of your
escape.
campus by a representative
Pull
of the
a fire
Israeli
alarm.
Defense Forces. We have seen significant efforts to deny the seriousness of Hamas's attacks, terror on October 7th. So I assume providing your campus leadership information about what actually happened would be helpful as you address the explosion of anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, they said they were informed by your office that briefing will not happen this calendar year. That leaves the impression that you don't want the information, President McGill. Will you commit to getting a briefing schedule before the end of the year from the IDF?
Madam Chairwoman, I do not in any way deny the brutality and barbaric nature of the
But
Hamas
will you
attack
get
on
a
October
briefing?
7th.
We in Congress have had a briefing and seen the
He's
films.
a habitual
I
fire
received
alarm
many
puller.
invitations. I do have to attend to my calendar.
Cocaine is a
Dr.
killer drug.
Kornbluth, will you hear what these people have to say?
I will hear what anyone who wants to give me information wants to
Thank you.
say.
Thank you. I yield back. Mr. Bowman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
There we go.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your experiences and expertise during this very difficult time.
It's important to remember.
Quick yes or no question. Do you all feel that education globally is very important in addressing the issue of anti-Semitism? You could just shake your head or say yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
Education is key. Okay, thank you for saying that. I'm asking that question because, you know, a lot of
Very
this
thought-provoking.
conversation has been framed around, you know, holding students accountable for their
No, it's holding
threats
schools
of violence
accountable.
towards Jewish students
That's
as
what
they
it should
should be
be.
held accountable. Absolutely. And some of it has been framed around, you know, additional punishments, of course. But there's been a lot of political pandering discussed here without the action that goes with the accountability and the condemnation that must happen when we see
Stop with the word
anti-Semitism
salad. Just
as
get
it
to what the hell you're
raises its
talking
head.
about.
And what I mean by that is I introduced something called the Great Replacement Theory Resolution, and I wanted us as Congress to
Everyone's got
condemn the
their own
Great
stupid agenda.
Replacement Theory. The Great Replacement Theory is a white supremacist theory that
No.
says
What the hell does this have to
Jews,
do with
blacks,
what's
and
happening on
immigrants are
campuses?
looking to
You're such
replace
an
white
idiot.
people in America.
You shut up.
I introduced
Let me
that
try and
theory
figure
last
out how I can
Congress.
tie this
It
into my
passed along
cause.
Democratic
You
lines.
self-absorbed,
I don't believe any
useless cue
Republicans
ball.
voted for that particular resolution. In addition, my
your
colleagues on the
resolution
other side of the
stupid?
aisle continue to look to cut funding to the Department of Education, which will be critical to helping us fight anti-Semitism.
No, it won't.
In addition, we
Do
have
nothing.
discussed already
Do nothing.
cuts
It's
to the
promoted
Office of
anti-Semitism.
Civil Rights that my Republican colleagues support. That also is critical to fighting anti-Semitism. I would also
no.
add
It's
cuts
really
to
just
the
about
Department
not
of Health
teaching
and
them to
Human
hate Jews
Services
in school.
as
That's
part
really
of this
the key.
conversation. So absolutely we must condemn, absolutely we must hold people and students accountable.
Oh, God.
But how do we get into the mud and do the real work of fighting anti-Semitism without investing in education in the way that we need to invest?
Stop having
Not
them
just
take
at the
money
higher education
from the
level,
Middle East
but in
to
our
teach their
K-12
students
schools
to
as
hate
well.
Israel. It's that simple.
I'm a former K-12 educator for
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah, he
I taught
focused on the
elementary
K much more
school.
than the 12.
I was a dean in the high school, and I was a middle school principal for 10 and a half years.
Yeah.
Our kids read the Diary of Anne Frank.
The ones
I've
who
had
could read.
students who have gone to the Holocaust Museum. I still have students in my district from the Bronx, black or brown, visiting the Holocaust Museum,
Do you?
becoming educated and wanting to learn more.
Do you? Okay.
Talk to me about the need, not just for you all as leaders in higher education, but every single person in this room's responsibility to fight anti-Semitism and anti-hate in all its forms. And I just want to add, we have an original sin in our nation of slavery and
There we go.
discrimination.
There
That
we go.
sin
Black
continues
Lives
to
Matter.
evolve as segregation,
go.
separation,
There you go.
and a lack of understanding
Fixate
and empathy
on
of
your
knowledge
issue,
of each
because
other.
that's all
Let me
that
just speak
matters here.
briefly
The
to
point of
all
the
of that.
hearing,
We'll
let's
start
just
hearing
go
down.
far afield
Yes,
of
thank you,
that.
Congressman Bowman.
Yeah.
This actually echoes what I had said earlier, which is it's every single one of our responsibility. And this is
I don't
why
think
I
that
am
these
heartened
students
by the full
are
MIT community taking up
are
this
sitting here
problem.
saying,
It's
let's
a
hate the
human
black people.
problem,
Yes.
person
Idiots.
to person.
Oh,
So I
so
appreciate
shut
what
up.
you had to say about this.
Shut up.
I
What
want
you
to
said
add
was hideous.
that I'm so glad that you raised K through 12 because everybody here is talking as if what has happened on the college campus happened de novo and those kids came to campus and they never had an education before. So we need to be teaching
No, the
about
problem is people like
anti-Semitism,
you, Dr.
not just the
Nadel.
Holocaust, anti-Semitism
Shut
and
up.
racism in America.
Brownie
And our
woman.
kids live in segregated communities. So you have white kids living with white kids, black kids living with.
That
They
should
never
not
interact
happen.
with each
That
other. They
should
don't
not
go to
happen
school
until they
together.
get to
They don't know
college
each
and we
other.
give them
So of course,
segregated
hate is going to be a
campuses.
major part of
Idiot.
our society
Stupid.
if we continue to have
You're sitting here
segregation
screaming
in our
against
communities,
segregation,
in our
and
homes.
then you
I'm
have
sorry,
this woman
please.
you're conversing with
Congressman,
defending
I
having
so appreciate
segregated
what
schooling
you
in
asked,
houses.
and
You jackass.
I think one of the thoughts I have is that the immediate action is very important and the calling out of the hateful action. And for the longer term, it's an all societal education obligation,
And yet
as well
somehow
as
the
every one of our
hotbed
responsibilities
of
to be fighting
anti-Jew
anti-Semitism.
is in colleges filled
Thank
with
you so much for your
Democrats.
question.
But it's
We
a
have spent a
societal
lot of
problem.
time here talking about the importance of accountability for behavior
If they
that
spend
crosses
enough
the
time
line. We talked
afterwards
about how
away from
important it is
universities,
to
they seem to hate Jews
denounce
less. Why is that?
language that offends
Someone asked
our
them that question.
values.
As we should.
But it's
Why
as
is
we
it that once they
should,
get out of
but
that
ultimately the
fish
path forward
tank
is
of
education.
schools, they
It's
stop hating
education
Jews quite
about
as much.
the history of this
Idiots.
hate and this bigotry. It's also education about how it manifests in the present and what modern anti-Semitic tropes look like. And it's also education about how do you actually engage in civil dialogue on really complex and divisive issues.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
Ms. Letlow, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. To our university presidents, yes or no, have you established rigorous programs and rules to address and prevent sexual harassment and violence against women on your campuses? Yes or no? Dr. Gay?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. McGill?
Yes.
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 Thank you. Please bear with me because as a mom, a daughter, and a woman, what I'm about to share is hard. An article from CNN, which examines the Israeli investigation into acts of sexual violence by Hamas during the events of October 7th, includes a testimony from a female witness of the Nova Festival attack. Quote, "They bent someone over, and I understood he was raping her. And then he was passing her on to someone else. The woman who was not identified said of what she saw. Quote, she was alive. She stood on her feet, and she was bleeding from her back. I saw that he was pulling her hair. She had long brown hair. I saw him chop off her breast, and then he was throwing it toward the road. Tossed it to someone else, and they started playing with it. The witness added, I remembered seeing another person raping her, and while he was within her, he shot her in the head." This is just one of hundreds of accounts of sexual assault that happened on October 7th. Dr. Gay, an article in the Harvard Crimson dated October 10th includes a statement from the Harvard Undergraduate Palestine Solidarity Committee, co-signed by 33 other student organizations at Harvard. I'd like to read the statement to you. Quote, "We, the undersigned student organizations, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence." How, Dr. Gay, do you reconcile the blatant hypocrisy of allowing your students a forum to promote and celebrate terrorist groups that make the rape and mutilation of women and children a core function of their operations, while at the same time working for years to combat sexual violence towards women, and by allowing a month to pass before addressing with a real plan and the demonstrations and intimidations on your campuses? What message is this and this delay conveying to your women on your campuses? I can only imagine how terrifying it is to be a Jewish woman on any of your campuses. Just last night, a Jewish student from MIT wrote to me that she felt fearful and was forced to leave her study group during her doctoral exams because someone in her group told her that the women at the Nova Festival deserved to die because they were partying on stolen land. Now, while I am grateful for your condemning of anti-Semitism in statements to your students and to this committee, it's not enough. There has been no real action to hold anti-Semitic students accountable for their behavior. They should be expelled. The bottom line is that the buck stops with university presidents, and all students should feel safe on a college campus, especially in this case, Jewish women, as it would be terrifying to know that my administration is not doing more than simply condemning student groups perpetuating terrorist messaging. And as a former administrator myself in higher education, this is a major step backward in all that we have done to stand up against sexual violence towards women. I have always defended higher education in this institution, but quite frankly today, I am embarrassed. I yield back the remainder of my time to Ms. Stefanik.
Dr. Gay, did anyone contact you about flying the Israeli flag over Harvard Yard?
Yes.
And the decision was made not to allow the flag to be flown over Harvard Yard?
It's been standard protocol at the university for years to only fly the American flag unless we have a visiting dignitary.
So the decision was made to allow the Ukraine flag to be flown over Harvard Yard?
That was a decision that was made by my predecessor as an exception to a long-standing rule.
So it was an exception. So you made an exception for the Ukrainian flag, but not the university made an exception for the Ukrainian flag, but not the Israeli flag.
That was a choice made by my predecessor.
Are you aware that there are stickers that are placed on Harvard University Dining Services food calling for Israeli apartheid? It says, warning, Sabra funds Israeli apartheid and the murder of Palestinians. Is that acceptable?
I can assure you that we have strong disciplinary processes when there are violations of our rules.
And this is a violation of the rules?
I can't see that very clearly, but
are you not aware of the stickers being placed on the food items provided to Harvard students?
I do recall an episode like that.
And there are disciplinary actions ongoing?
Given students' privacy and FERPA, which I'm sure you know well, I will not say more about these particular cases other than to say that disciplinary processes are underway.
Thank you. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. And I am struck by the passion which we all are bringing because we know that the issue we're talking about today, anti-Semitism, white supremacy, the issues that give rise to this, the issues of hate need to be addressed. What saddens me is that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle recently passed an appropriations bill out of the committee that would cut funding to the Office of Civil Rights by 25%. We know that we must investigate these and hold universities, including your universities, or the universities in my home state of New Mexico, accountable if they do not protect students from anti-Semitism, if they do not protect students from Islamophobia, if they do not protect students from the many versions of hate that we too often see in our communities. So I would urge and encourage and ask and plead with my colleagues to fully fund the Department of Education and the Office of Civil Rights so we could go after those instances where universities fail to do what they're required to do. Recently, I sat with students from New Mexico, from the University of New Mexico, to ask them to share with me so I could bring their stories here about what are you facing on our campus back home. And sadly, the stories I heard would make your heart cry. They made my heart cry. We heard from Sephardi students who are proud of the heritage they bring with them, having suffered through for their minds the Inquisition. We heard from Ashkenazis whose parents and grandparents are there, grandparents and great-grandparents, suffered through the Holocaust, and how there is a normalization. They are worried about the fact that anti-Semitism is now being normalized. And we all have a
And your
duty
whole civil
to
rights
fight back against that.
does
And one of the things that they pointed out is that there seems to be a lack of
does whittle
understanding
to
of the
nothing.
history of anti-Semitism. There seems to be a lack of understanding
There's a lack of
of
understanding
the
by
attacks
Congress
on Jews
as to
over
exactly
the
how to
centuries,
address this
as we
problem.
mentioned, from the Inquisition and before that to the Holocaust to the latest that we are now seeing. And they said, how come there isn't
How come?
general curricula that requires it? We talked about the importance of K through 12, understanding that. We know at Harvard, for example, that you have I believe, a course on the Holocaust.
Always.
But what do you have for, before you get to that specialized course, like how are we making sure that all students understand that? And you're, Madam President, if you could answer that, I know you
Madam
looked like you
President,
wanted to
you
respond.
want to answer that? Yeah, wow.
You're making an excellent point. So
That tooth
already in
on
our
the left
curriculum,
there is
there
like
are so
really
many
like
opportunities for students to
it's a full zip
learn
code closer
more
to me than
about
the other two.
relevant
The other
history.
rest are about.
But I think one of the things that has become apparent over the last couple of months is that we have to find ways of making that education more broadly available to our campus community, to all of our students, and also to our faculty and to our staff. And we have work to do on that for sure.
You suck.
And because this idea that Jewish students and that Jews are not indigenous to these lands, I think is something that needs to be pushed back against, right? And that some of these false narratives, I think, are really important. And I think one of the questions then is, what do we do when there has been that loss of faith? When students at UNM say, we're being told we're not from that land, right? And students who are indigenous, who share both, heritage of the Sephardi, heritage of the Zuni Pueblo, heritage of being Latino, who want to and deserve to be able to claim it all. Like I would ask, and maybe Dr. Nadal, or I think you wanted to say something. How do we regain that trust?
How do we regain that trust?
What you're saying is really, really important. We're making a real effort to educate our students on the history of the Middle East. Our Center for International Studies has organized an online course and really understanding the facts. The other thing I do want to say, though, about your comments on the Holocaust, as the last survivors of the Holocaust are passing away, it really behooves us to make sure our students at all levels understand the history of the Holocaust. And as you say, this starts at K-12, not just once they get to us at university.
Oh my God.
Dr. Nadal, did you want?
I would just add that the magical word online, we can really reach millions and millions of people with online programs about this history.
Thank you. And with that, my time has expired and I yield back.
A waste of money.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure-Fernandez. Mr. Kiley, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Oh, I like Kylie. He's in
A few
California.
months ago, the Foundation for Individual Rights.
He looks like he's 12.
released its
You're gonna
rankings
see. He
of
looks
how
like
good
he's 12 years
colleges are
old.
Protecting free speech. And out of
He's pretty smart.
248 schools
There you go.
ranked, Harvard ranked dead last, number 248. In fact, it was the worst score in the history of the rankings, 0 out of 100. Now, you've quibbled with the study, the methodology, but you don't get to be dead
don't know.
last
It's a good
without
question.
being some truth there. And yet, in the aftermath of October 7th, including several times today, you've repeatedly stressed Harvard's commitment to free speech. You've certainly been more outspoken about free speech after October 7th than you were before. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So anyone looking at this objectively will see that you had literally the worst record in the country on free speech. And it was only once chants of globalize the Intifada started disrupting classes and harassing students that you suddenly became a stalwart for free speech. Do you understand why that's troubling to people?
Yep. Yep.
Respectfully,
Kylie gets
I
it again.
disagree with that perspective,
Hmm.
and I don't think it's an accurate representation.
Also,
of
we're so
how
worried about
Harvard
free speech.
treats
Never
speech
before,
on
but now
campus.
we're really worried
We
about
are
it.
committed to free expression.
We happen to get
and making
$1.5
space
billion
for a wide
from the Middle
range of
East over the last
views
3
and
years.
voices
That's got
and
nothing to do
opinions.
with why we
It's
allow
Thank
this
you,
free
Dr. Gay,
value
but
to our
I asked if
institution.
you understand why people are troubled, and you proceeded to try to defend yourself, which suggests to me that you don't
do.
really understand and haven't adequately tried to. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I'd really appreciate a yes or no answer if you could. Do you believe Hamas is a terrorist
I
organization?
agree with this.
Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Senator Schumer, in a speech a few days ago, characterized October 7th as a vicious, blood-curdling, premeditated massacre of innocent men, women, children, and elderly. Do you agree with that characterization?
That characterization is accurate, and I have condemned the heinous and barbaric terrorist attacks.
Senator Schumer also said that when students on college campuses across the country who wear a yarmulke or display a Jewish star are harassed, verbally vilified, pushed, and even spat upon and punched, that is anti-Semitism. Do you agree with him that that's anti-Semitism?
I agree.
Do you acknowledge that some incidents of that nature have been occurring on Harvard's campus?
I have been talking with students over the last couple of months, and they have shared searing testimony about some of the things that they have experienced.
And I'm glad you've made that outreach. But if you were talking to a prospective student's family, a Jewish student's family, right now, could you look them in the eye and tell them that their son or daughter would be safe and feel safe and welcome on your campus?
We are absolutely committed to student safety.
Yes, but I didn't ask that question about your commitment. I said, could you look them in the eye right now, the family of a prospective Jewish student, and assure them that their son or daughter would feel safe and welcome on your campus?
We are taking every step to ensure their physical and their psychological safety.
So yes or no to
And
my
I stand
question, though.
by
Did
that.
you want to answer it? I guess
I have
not.
answered your question.
No, you haven't.
If
Very clearly
would
have
you
not.
say that a person who is an avowed neo-Nazi is someone that you would want to be part of the Harvard community?
Those are not consistent with Harvard's values, but at the same time, we allow a wide berth for free expression.
But the question
and
was,
a
would you
variety of
want
views.
such a person who is an avowed neo-Nazi to be part of the Harvard community? Yes or no?
Those are not consistent with Harvard values.
So you would not want such a person to be part of the community?
Those are not consistent with Harvard
Oh, for
values.
crying out loud! Why
Would you want someone who has called for the eradication of the Jewish people to be part of the Harvard community?
Again, those are not consistent with Harvard values, where we are committed to making
Would you
no
want
space
someone
on
who
our
has
campus
called for the elimination of the
anti-Semitism.
state of Israel to be part of the Harvard community?
There is no place at Harvard for anti-Semitism.
But the elimination of the state of Israel, someone who advocates for that, is that someone you'd want to be part of the Harvard community?
There is no place for anti-Semitism at Harvard.
You're not answering my questions very well, Dr. Gabe, so I'll move on. You've said today that you're proud of Harvard's initial response, the initial steps Harvard has taken.
Ask her if anti-Zionism is
aftermath of October
anti-Semitism.
7th. But one of your predecessors, Dr. Larry Summers, was anything but proud. He said that in his 50 years of Harvard affiliation, I have never been as disillusioned and alienated as I am today. The silence from Harvard's leadership has allowed Harvard to appear at best neutral towards acts of terror against the Jewish state of Israel. Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in the aftermath of October 7th?
So to be clear about what I was doing on October 7th, it was identifying whether or not we had any faculty
Is
or
there
students
anything
who
you
were
would have done
Israel.
differently?
Had I known that the statement issued by the students would have been wrongly attributed to the university, I would have spoken sooner about it. But I was focused on action that weekend, not statements.
Well,
The
I appreciate you
statements were
saying
the
that,
action.
but it's clear for me from your testimony, President Gay, I don't think you're a person of any kind of prejudice yourself, but you clearly seem to believe that that the forces of anti-Semitism are a constituency that needs to be catered to. I think that's clear from your silence, from the carefully parsed statements, from the Orwellian passive voice, and unfortunately, that message was heard loud and clear by the forces of anti-Semitism on your campus and has reverberated across American higher
Well
education
said.
and seeped into
Well
our broader
said.
culture.
This guy is a
we need
rising
fundamental
star.
cultural change
Thank you,
on
Mr.
university
Kiley.
campuses.
This guy's great.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley.
I really like
Mr.
him.
DeSanya, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
He's really good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the witnesses and just comment.
I'm a big fan of
this is the
Kylie.
best and worst of times from my perspective for this committee, that looking at the panel and the positions you hold are not something that I could have imagined when I went to college. many years ago.
And it's
So
pretty
thank you
sad
for your
representation today.
vocations. I mean that with all sincerity, not your careers. Dr.
Yay,
Bell,
let's
I
applaud
mentioned
women
last
who
night I
managed
had a
to
wonderful
somehow get a
conversation
job
with a
in
dear friend who
education.
I started my friendship with at your institution. Gabby Giffords and I were both in state and local government. We went to that
Very
program.
big accomplishment.
And it was a wonderful experience.
Somehow they managed to break through that
One of
glass
those
ceiling.
examples of where academia interacted with the real world in the world of action. So I want to thank you for that. Dr. Nadell, I want to talk to you as somebody from the Bay Area and very involved with technology. for many years about its impact on our public discourse, on hatred, on anti-Semitism, on racism. I'm reflecting on a Berkeley professor, Michael Goldhaber, I think.
Like dug up
Yes,
Jack
he's the
Palance
Cassandra
here.
of the internet, according to the New York Times, where 30 years ago he predicted that once people started to connect with technology, that the sociology
like Jack
of reality and knowledge would change. And I would say this hearing is a comment to that. So could you comment on social media's impact on anti-Semitism and hatred, both in academia and as you see it in your research?
Thank you for the question. Social media has been probably the most destructive force
I
for
can't listen
spreading
to this woman.
anti-Semitism
She sucks.
ever
You're one of the most
imaginable,
destructive forces creating
certainly
anti-Semitism.
in my
I
own
hate this woman.
lifetime. When
Can't stand this woman.
a pop star like Kanye West
No,
can
it's not Kanye
put out
West.
a few
You're worse
messages
than
that
Kanye
are
West.
anti-Semitic, and he has
You're much
millions
worse
and
than
millions
Kanye
of
West.
followers. And in
You're
the
an
wake of
idiot.
that, Jewish
You're a
students were also
bloody,
feeling
stinking
terribly
idiot.
unsafe
Moron.
and insecure. And we have
Doofus.
seen this over and over, and
Doofus.
we've seen it harnessed not only from the left,
You're
but
one of the
we've also
strongest
seen it
arguments for
harnessed
censoring
from the
free
right.
speech.
Social media and various chat forms, various different platforms
Withering
were
idiot.
used to create the Unite the Right rally in
Self-destructive.
2017. And of course, the man who's been convicted of murdering 11 people at the Tree of Life Synagogue also posted on social media that he wasn't waiting any longer and he was going in. So it's
If
been
she
terrible.
was like an advocate for like
And there's been
the
so
best
much
women's
really good research
hairstyles,
and
she
writing
would
on
be
the
less
subject
dangerous
matter
to
in
society
the last
than
10
her
years.
current role. And she
where
would be a menace in that capacity.
I'm thinking about The Shallows from Nicholas Carr in 2005, where
did
his
create
research
Kanye.
shows that globally our skulls are actually decreasing because of how we retain and absorb information.
Your skulls
So
are
all of this
decreasing?
on the educational side, and I'll ask,
Speak for yourself,
maybe
Jack.
starting with Dr. Gay, this is about the short-term political moment that we're in, but I'm equally concerned with, and I've had this conversation with the chair and the ranking member, about what you see in education, that our brains are changing because how
Since her mouth
neuroscience and
is
everything we've
formed like a
learned
dummy's
because of
mouth.
research about
Like
how
that
this works in the
lines
last
over here.
50 years. But until the
I
Congress
don't,
figures
my
out
beard
how we roll in this, in this committee, what is it doing to young people? In Nicholas Carr's book, in The Chaos Machine, Susan Lin, a distinguished member of your faculty, I just had a lovely conversation about her book, about who's minding our kids. I can't help but ask this question because it's part of the larger long-term problem that this committee really should be dealing with in a nonpartisan, thoughtful way. What do you see when it comes to cognitive development and your students?
So recognizing that I'm not an expert, particularly on adolescent development or on social media, or
about how to run a school.
observation, which is that one of the things that's been laid bare over the last couple of months is how ill-equipped the community is and has been to
Colin
deal
Kaepernick
with
sitting there by the door
dialogue in
waiting his
moments of
chance to
crisis.
speak.
And instead, what is substituted for that is the social mediaification of dialogue. It's intemperate, it's ahistorical, and just mean. And it's a way of engaging that has been deeply socialized through social media and is reflexive for a lot of the students on our campus.
Dr. Kornberg, just because I just finished a book, Reestablishing Conversation by
I
one
do
of
see
your
the
faculty
Robert
who
Barnes
talks
there.
about this.
Yes.
Maybe you can just briefly.
No, I agree completely with President Gay, and I would say that, social media is like a drug, right? It's addictive, and it reinforces over and over again messages regardless of their truth. And so as educational communities, we need to strive for making sure our students know truth and speak to each other as human beings.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Madam Chair. Hopefully we can have a further discussion about that particular issue in this committee. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. DeSagne. Mr. Bean, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you, and good afternoon, panelists. Thank you so much for being here and your testimony today. There's a problem in your testimony, and I don't know if you know it. You've testified that you value free speech so much that it doesn't harm.
That's not me. Whoops.
Very good. Thank you. It came off, Madam Chair. Your testimony today, you've all testified that you value free speech so long as it doesn't interfere or harm students. You've said that you've created a very safe haven and you value safety for your students. The problem is the evidence doesn't support your testimony. Just as we started our meeting, the videotape showed what's really happening on your campus. The America sees what's happening, not only on your campuses, but at campuses across America. And then just today, we had some courageous students, some of which are still in this room today, courageous students that testified on your campuses, contradicting your testimony that it's a safe space. It's not a safe space. Imagine trying to be a Jewish student on campus and just going to the library, going to class, going to wherever on just being scared to death. That's real. That's real. So these videos and the testimony just doesn't add up. Here is some things that are we've seen. America has seen. There are these anti-Jewish campus organizations called Students for Justice in Palestine. They've been suspended and kicked off many campuses, but none of yours since October 7th. Their purpose is to just harass and intimidate Jewish students into retreating from campus life. President Gay, there are numerous videos of Students for Justice in Palestine. At Harvard, they're known as Palestine Solidarity Committee, assaulting, intimidating Jewish students on your campus. When Palestine Solidarity Committee took over University Hall, instead of removing them, your administration gave them burritos. President Kornbluth, in one of the most observed, crazy campus incidents of the past 2 months, a viral video went of a math professor at MIT handing his lecture over to MIT's version of Students for Justice in Palestine, the MIT for Palestine Coalition, who invoked lies and just called for hatred and harm against Jewish students. And he sat and watched this. So here's your chance to tell America who's gotten fired, what organizations you've kicked off your campus. Does anybody want to jump in and say, we kicked them off or we've expelled students? Anybody want to jump in? You've all also said that you value academic diversity, but you have no idea how many of your professors are liberal or how many of your professors are conservative. So how do you know? If you don't know that, that's a pretty important piece of information. If you don't know that, how do you know that you're academically diverse? Anybody jump in? Just go for it.
Good question.
I just happen to have the Harvard Crimson, which did a study of their professors on Harvard campuses. This is dated last year. 80% of professors either identified as liberal or very liberal. 80% of the faculty there versus 1% identified as conservative, 0% identified as very conservative. So 80% versus 1%. President Gay, is that the type of academic diversity that you brag about at America's leading institution, Harvard?
We seek to have a very diverse campus on every dimension.
80% versus 1%, you would say that's diverse. Madam Chair, I'd like to yield the remaining of my time to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you. Dr. Gay, according to the
Mr.
Hillel
Dean.
College Guide, the Crimson Freshman Survey, and even Harvard's own Education Next journal, the population of Jewish undergrads at Harvard has plummeted from roughly 25% in the 1980s to between 5 and 10% now. Why is that?
The Jews?
That is not data that we collect as part of the admissions process, so
No,
I
not at
can't
all.
speak to those numbers or
Can't
to the
speak to-
trajectory.
So what is the percentage of students
speak to our
who are
success
Jewish
and
at
eliminate
Harvard in
the Jewish
undergraduate now?
problem.
We
at
do
Harvard.
not collect religious affiliation as part of the admissions process.
Do you not rely on data collected by Harvard Hillel, which you visited for the first time after October 7th? I'll just be honest with you. When I was a freshman, I enjoyed going to Harvard Hillel and had the opportunity to celebrate Shabbat dinners with my fellow undergrads. The fact that it took you until after October 7th to go to Harvard Hillel is unacceptable. Yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Moran, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
I don't think that she has.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Gay, I'd like to direct my questions to you if that's okay. In an open letter to members of the Harvard community that's posted on Harvard's website, you stated the following, quote, "Anti-Semitism has no place at Harvard," end quote. You also said, quote, "We are committed to doing the hard work to address
Well, since they
the
gave us the
scourge,"
lip
end
service,
quote.
that's enough.
Just moments ago, when Representative Kiley asked you questions, you reaffirmed one of those statements and said, "There is no place at Harvard for anti-Semitism."
Well,
Will you
not.
now reaffirm those statements today
Oh, shut up.
with me?
Oh,
Yes.
my God.
Good. Are these mere words, or is Harvard willing to put
No,
action behind
I will
these
now
words?
use words to
We
say it
are
was not
acting
mere words.
on that commitment.
Tell me how you're acting on that commitment in a very specific manner.
Well, to begin with the immediate actions that are focused on the physical security of our students in our campus, there's enhanced police presence, 24/7 threat monitoring, coordination with local, state, and federal law enforcement.
While we're
And
teaching
when
our
necessary,
kids to
we
hate
close the
Jews.
gates of Harvard Yard so that outside actors are limited in their ability to use our
It's not
campus as a
outside
platform.
actors.
When
It's
you
your own
talk about-
students.
When you talk about outside actors,
whose
let's talk about
minds
the
you've been
inside actors.
infecting.
So you've had a number of students and student organizations that have made many anti-Semitic statements in the past few months and
Peyton
past
Manning is
years,
better when he's
frankly.
doing commercials than as a
And it's
congressman.
gone, in my opinion, without any response from the university. President Gay, a report by AMCHA Initiative for the 2021-2022 academic year found that Harvard saw the most anti-Semitic incidents, that's 25, of any university surveyed. You were dean at the time, correct?
Sorry, what was the date?
2021 and 2022.
Yes, I was dean of faculty of arts and sciences, yes.
In 2022, after the editors of the Harvard Crimson endorsed the anti-Semitic BDS movement, which seeks the destruction of Israel, a group of 49 faculty penned a letter defending the Crimson editors. Did you ever speak out against BDS during that time?
The university and I am clear in our positions about BDS. We do not support that position. It's counter to academic freedom and at
speak out
odds
against
with
it.
the openness that is part of our strength as an institution.
Well, when you said earlier and you reaffirmed to me the statement, "There's no place at Harvard for anti-Semitism." Well, those words really ring meaningless if those folks remain at Harvard that promote anti-Semitism. Would you agree?
We do not sanction individuals for their political views or their speech. When that speech crosses into conduct that
Unless-
violates our
unless it's pro-Trump.
behavior-based policies, bullying, harassment, and intimidation, we take action.
Have any students been expelled or disciplined for bullying, harassment, or these actions that you're listing?
I can assure you, we have robust student disciplinary processes.
No. I didn't
use
not
them.
ask about your process. I asked if any students had been disciplined or removed from Harvard as a result of the bullying and the harassment that's taken place based on their anti-Semitic views in the past months since the October 7th attack.
We consistently apply our policies.
So have any students, can you give me a number? Has it been 2, 10, 20? Or have there been 0 students that have been actually disciplined for their activity? Not their speech, their activity.
Students have been held to account for any episode in which they violated our behavior-based policies.
You know
empty
approximately
liar.
how many of those students have been held to account in your mind? Or is that something you're going to keep from public view? I'm not asking for the identification of students. I just want to know how many students actually have been held to a disciplinary standard.
I'm happy to have my office follow up with some specific numbers if that would be helpful to you.
That would be very helpful. I'm frankly surprised that you can't appear before this body going to talk about this issue and not be prepared to tell us whether or not any students, or to the extent or how many, have actually been disciplined for their anti-Semitic behavior in the past months. But you can't tell me that?
What I can assure you is that we use our policies. We use our processes and we hold
Such an
students to
anti-stupid
account
liar.
for their behavior.
Who do you think
Recently, a
actually believes
coalition
you?
of student groups on your campus posted an open letter that placed the sole blame of the Hamas attack on Israel. In fact, in that letter, they said, quote, that they...
Thank you, sir. The gentleman's time's expired.
I yield back. Thank you.
I'd like now to acknowledge myself for 5 minutes for questions. I came across an opinion article in the Michigan Daily, a U of M student paper written by an anonymous source with Michigan in color. The article stated in the opening paragraph the following. On October 7th, Palestinians in Gaza launched a surprise attack
That looks nothing
on
like
the
Miss Fox.
colonizing force of Israel. one of the largest ever Palestinian liberation operations in modern history. They invaded colonial settlements, bulldozed territorial walls, and captured Israeli soldiers. Although any violence is unconscionable, the rebellion was unavoidable.
Sorry.
This makes me think of a recent book written by Barry Weiss that seeks to define anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism successfully turns Jews into the symbol of whatever a given civilization defines as its most sinister and threatening qualities. When you look through the dark lens, you can understand how under communism, the Jews were the capitalists, how under Nazism, the Jews were the race contaminators. And today, when the greatest sins are racism and colonialism, Israel, the Jew among nations, is being demonized as the last bastion of white racist colonialism.
Yep.
A unique source of evil, not
Yep.
just in the region, but the world.
Well said.
Whatever the role the Jews are needed for, well, that's the part they are forced to play.
Yep.
And that's the part they are forced to play on your campuses, which is why you're here today.
Well
now,
said.
I know this article did not come out on your campuses, but this rhetoric is in lockstep with much that we've seen on campuses today and much of the heinous attacks against Jews we've seen throughout the 19th
Well
and
said.
20th centuries. I want to ask for the record, because many of us here on Capitol Hill hear from our public and our constituents that you are failing to create space where issues of the day are debated without fear of cancellation or ostracization. Are you all concerned about the anti-Semitic rhetoric that we're seeing on these college campuses around the nation at each of your own? And I don't think we can state enough individually. If you can give me maybe 15 to 10 seconds, what each of you are doing. Just remind us what you're doing on your college campuses. 10, 15 seconds, each of you, please. Nothing. Okay, great. Some of your peers have turned a blind eye or even permitted anti-Semitic speech by faculty, students, and outsiders on campus. The question today is, again, what you're doing about it. I got silence a couple seconds ago. Maybe you've been given a couple seconds to think about it. But I'll make this easier. Would each of you commit to conducting a review of what is taught and promptly report back to this committee with recommendations on how to address these topics? Okay, I'll take silence as a no. I want to just say that I'm greatly concerned that students are being taught to view certain groups as oppressors, and now apparently that includes Jewish people. And the silence on my two direct questions, I think, serves as a glaring answer for your lack of commitment for standing in opposition.
Well
I
done.
fear our future and the future of our nation when oppression is used so generally to green light reverse discrimination by people that hide behind your institutions and this institutional leaders themselves. With that, I'm
You're a
just gonna go
disgrace,
ahead
is
and,
what he's
and
saying.
move on,
He's saying
because
to the panel, you
I don't
suck,
think you have
you're a
any
disgrace.
satisfactory answers for me. The House is currently in a series of votes, and members need to be on the House floor. As such, the committee shall stand in recess until immediately following this last vote. I urge my colleagues to return quickly to the hearing following votes, and I appreciate the patience of our witnesses and the audience. I would ask that you all remain in your seats so our witnesses are able to leave.
Okay, so it seemed that guy. I don't know who that was. They didn't give us a name, but he did a great job there. All right, it seems like they're breaking for a while. I have no idea how long they're breaking for. I think C-SPAN will probably close this link down anyway. And I think that I got enough from this hearing. I'm kind of worn out of hearing these four idiots, especially that Nadell woman. Oh my God, what a disaster she was. It's like basically Jonathan Greenblatt had like an extra X chromosome injected into himself and giving the stupidest possible policies for trying to fight anti-Semitism by basically inflaming anti-Semitism. Terrible human being. Awful. And that's who the left called, because the left really doesn't like Jews very much. They like saying that they like Jews. They just don't really. Yeah, you're welcome for covering. It was my pleasure. Let me make sure I got everything. I think I got everything. I think I'm good. I think I got everything here. Tonight I'm having a party. I'm planning on starting my show an hour early at 9 o'clock tonight. 9 o'clock Eastern, and I'm planning on having a party. It's a celebration. It's an unshackling, and it's also a wedding. So That's starting 9 o'clock, and I'm planning on having a whole bunch of folks come on in, people you know and love. Some you might hate. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to talk about. I haven't figured that part out yet either. But it's going to be a 3-hour party. There's going to be some drinking. There's going to be fun. There's going to be laughs. It's going to be good times here starting at 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. So I urge you all. I don't have a link created yet, so that's why I'm not dropping it here yet. I might drop it in a post link. I'm not sure. And I'll definitely notify you on Locals, which is where you should be following me, goodlogic.locals.com. I will see you all this evening at 9 o'clock as we're going to have a party. And till then, hope the rest of the day is awesome. Make sure you stay happy, eat the bugs, and as always, Godspeed.